seeing?
Yeah, I'm going to check the YouTube now.
Okay.
And I'm checking the site.
Just give me a verbal confirm when we're ready.
Looks good on the website, and that's taken from YouTube, so it's probably
Okay.
both good.
If everyone but Ed can mute their mics, that'd be great, please. Thank you. Here we go. We're going to go live. All right. We're getting that feedback in. Ed, the floor is yours. We hear YouTube feedback.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 6th Town of Islip Planning Board meeting. This is our first meeting that we'll be trying something virtually as opposed to in person. Obviously, the current conditions do not permit us to, sorry, getting feedback there, do not permit us to do this in person for the health and safety of everyone. We wanted to make sure we did this remotely and had an opportunity for everybody who wanted to speak on an application, for everybody who wanted to observe an application to see what was going on. If you are here and would like to speak on a specific application, please look at the bottom of your screen. There'll be a Q&A button. I would ask you to please click on that Q&A button and enter your name, address, and the agenda item number you'd like to speak on. Somebody will get back to you and make sure that we get you for that agenda item so that you can speak on that. Don't worry if you're on the phone and do not have the option to look on the screen and do that. During that public hearing, you'll have the opportunity to press *9 on your phone, at which point we'll know that you would like to speak, and we'll call you to speak on that specific agenda item. So please bear with us the next few minutes as we take care of some administrative stuff, and then we'll be underway shortly. Thank you. And don't forget to hit the Q&A on the bottom if you're here to speak on a specific application. Please enter your name, address, and agenda item number once you do that.
We're making progress. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Again, if you're just joining, we're taking care of some administrative items. If you would like to speak on a particular application, please hit the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and enter your name, address, and the agenda item you'd like to speak on, and we'll take care of that. We'll be back with you shortly on the planning board meeting.
Mr. Chairman, it seems we've identified applicants for agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So far, 11, 12, and 14. And I think 9 and 10 we can cover as we get there. So I believe we have enough of the applicants identified in the attendee list to get started.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Again, welcome to the May 6th Town of Islip Planning Board meeting. Probably our first one that has been done virtually, certainly the first one virtually since I've been on this board. These extraordinary circumstances obviously mandated that we do things a little differently this time. We've done that, but we've done that also to protect not only the public's right to speak and be heard, so you'll all be given an opportunity to be heard if you'd like to be heard. And if you're just joining us again, please hit the Q&A function and enter your name, address, and the item number you'd like to speak on, and we'll call you during that specific item. I'd like to stress to everyone to please state your name before you speak publicly, so we have that for the record, and please speak directly and clearly into the microphone, and make sure there's nothing else going on in the background in the room you're speaking from that would interrupt the proceeding. Barbara is our court reporter. You can see her on the screen. If you're not saying something clearly, she may interrupt you and ask you to repeat that. So in order to avoid that and let Barbara be very happy and get through this as comfortably as possible, please speak as clearly as possible. As we go forward, I just want to take a roll call on the board members to make sure we're all here. So Barbara has that for the record. Gary Bruno. Gary, was that an aye or a yes?
Here.
Thank you. Tim Mattermore.
Here.
Kevin Brown.
Here.
Mike Moriarty.
Here.
Anthony Smecci.
Present.
Ryan Frugiari.
Here.
And Ed Friedland. Okay, so we do have a quorum. Calling to order the Town of Islip Planning Board meeting for Wednesday, May 6, 2020. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing. It's site plan modification, Jose Gomez, SP 2015-079, east side of Manitouk Boulevard, number 1615, 747 feet north of Locust Drive, Bayshore. Applicant requests landscaping and buffer relaxations in connection with the construction of a new church. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services with offices at 1040 Terry Road, Ronkonkoma, New York. Shall I begin?
Yes, please, go ahead.
We're here today for a site plan modification regarding front and total yard landscaping, as well as a buffer relaxation for a property located at 1615 Manitouk Boulevard in Bay Shore. This is in connection with the construction of a new church at the site. I'd like to begin with the buffer relaxation. It is going to be along the south side of the property. The applicant is able to provide a 25-foot buffer along all sides of the property, except where it is improved with a CO'd two-story dwelling. Between the length of the dwelling, which is 26.4 feet, and the existing front yard setback that it maintains, it would be 59 feet of that total side there. We're also here for a landscaping relaxation. The front yard landscaping provided would be a little over 4,500 instead of the required 8,000. And the total yard landscaping would be 8,948 instead of the 16,000 that's required. Our client has provided the site plan to the Department of Engineering. They've conducted several reviews, and they believe that this is the best plan for the site itself. If the board has any questions, I'll take them now.
Ed, you're muted.
Is that it on your public presentation?
Yes.
So if we can pull it down off the screen, or I can see, are there any individuals that wanted to speak on this application? Not getting there. If anybody is on the phone and would like to speak on this application, you can hit *9 on your phone at this point, and we can allow you to speak publicly. If anyone else, okay. I see we have two hands up, so we're going to go to Pat first here. Pat, are you with us? I have to unmute.
Pat, the floor is yours. You should unmute your microphone, Pat.
Mute. Okay. Pat Klosowitz. My maiden name is Kolasa, which is on record as the owner of 1635 Manatuck Boulevard. I live several houses down from this proposed church. My concern is twofold. Is this church going to have a basement where they can hold their meetings and prayer sessions? Number two, noise level. Since this church has purchased these two properties, they have been holding outdoor meetings. Somebody, the pastor, whoever, screaming into a microphone for hours on end at the top of his lungs with lights. And I'm sitting in my own living room, several houses down, with the windows closed, the doors closed, the air conditioning on because it's summertime, and my television all the way up, volume. I still can't hear it. All I can hear is this person shrieking and screaming very angrily into a microphone about Jesus. Let me say something. I don't care. You want to build a church? Fine. But I shouldn't have to listen to somebody screaming at the top of their lungs about Jesus, would you die for Jesus, or what have you. If Jesus was down here today, I can almost guarantee you all, he would not be screaming into a microphone at the top of his lungs.
And the music.
And the music, okay? So therefore, are they gonna have an indoor basement or area to hold their meetings? And number two, are they going to continue using microphones and high beams for meetings in their yard?
Will they have meetings outside? I think. is the question.
Outside, yes. Who knows?
Thank you, Pat. We're going to go through all the public speaking, then I'm going to get those questions addressed for you this evening as part of the application. I will get both those questions answered for you. Thank you very much for participating and asking those questions. I'm going to turn to James O.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I do want to comment on this. My name is James Orlando. As for my address, I just wanted to kind of just tell you guys, I'm not comfortable with giving that. I do live in North Bay Shore, around the area. The only reason I'm not comfortable with giving the address is because I have seen personally some people who've questioned the town, and then unfortunately I have seen actions get taken against them. So I'm just not comfortable with actually giving an address, because my concern is truly coming from an area, you know, that I know is being industrialized over here, and I'm just concerned about what are the environmental impacts, and has any of that been studied? I would love to see if there was any study done on the soil samples that were there from when the original house built on the property had been demolished. Obviously, you guys know that in the Robert Clemente Park, there was a huge issue with construction materials that were dumped and led to our groundwater pollution. That became an issue, and I am concerned about that. And also that, you know, we are now becoming very industrialized in this area, which was originally a residential area. We now have a high density apartment buildings on the corner. We have commercial buildings on this block, not too far, obviously, from where this church wants to be built, including a laundromat, which is putting a lot of phosphate salts into our groundwater. And you have a very large farm across the street from where this church is going to be, which obviously we know is putting tons of pollutants in the source of nitrates from their fertilizer into the ground. And I know that the comment will be, well, you know, the Suffolk County Water Authority will be checking that and will be trying to clean water sources and stuff like that. However, at what cost? Why are we continuing to add chemicals and such to our water for future generations to figure out what this does to them, when the necessity for a church in this area really doesn't exist? I can't see how the negatives on this would in any way outweigh the positives that Mr. Gomez would expect to have come from this. I think adding a large parking lot, as I saw in those plans, surrounding an entire building and landscaping would only further add to a lot of the environmental concerns I have about this. And if anything, I think that Mr. Gomez himself should be paying them for a monitoring well to be put in to constantly have the water checked in this area, again, for those pollutants. And, you know, my other thing is, you know, it is a little different that we're obviously all doing this on Zoom, online instead of in person. And my biggest thing was, if Mr. Gomez has this in his best interest and he's really doing this for the right reasons, that this should be tabled until there's an in-person meeting with Mr. Gomez and the residents in this area to actually sit down and try to discuss all these issues. And my other thing too is that, you know, Brentwood School District is a very underfunded school district in the sense of 18,000 plus students and not enough funds to be able to get pushed across. The people who live in this area, what happens to their taxes? Shouldn't they be lowered for your changing of this area into more of an industrialized and commercialized area, rather than having to put the burden onto these people? Normal citizens and the residents of this town are held to higher standards by your ordinances. And the only thing I wanted to bring up also when it comes to the environmental impact is a couple of, you know, last summer when they had a lot of these things going on the property, the cars were parking on the grass. Well over 200 to 300 cars. And I had made that point to call the town, but of course on the weekend they can't come out. And I totally understand that. But my concern is that I've seen people who've had one car not on a pavement, and that they were then, again, followed up with actions against them. But meanwhile, here's a person who's having hundreds of cars parked on their lawn and nothing happened. And I watched one of those people back their vehicle right into a tree and then just got out like nothing happened. So I don't see much of a concern coming from them about the environment and the impacts. You know, there's children in this area. There's a school not too far away. I just don't see any positives from this, rather than negative impact of the pollutants that are going to be coming from cars and more traffic in the area. And my biggest question is what can possibly be done for that in any way? Because I don't see any positive coming from this being added to this area, when the residents in this area are constantly being basically put into a corner from the town's decisions on a lot of this.
Thank you, Pat. We will get to those questions with the applicant after the public hearing is all the speakers are done. But thank you again.
Thank you.
Turn to the next person. I have a phone number on here. The last 4, 6533. Please go ahead. Hello? A person at 6533, you are live if you'd like to say something. Okay. We're going to move on then to Lynn G.
Lynn G is using an older version of Zoom. I'm not permitted. Oh, Lynn G is now with us. Okay, Lynn G, Lynn G, the floor is yours. And your microphone is unmuted.
My questions are, how big is this church going to be? How many parishioners is it going to be? How many parkings does it count? And I too am concerned over revivals outside this church. I do not want to hear somebody preaching their religion all day. Is it only going to be a Sunday meeting, or is it going to be an everyday meeting? I don't know. This is like terrible, 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 terrible. And I have paid taxes since 1954 on my property, and I don't approve.
Lynn, we're losing you there.
Lynn, I think you accidentally may have muted yourself.
Lynn, we can't hear you. Lynn?
The knocking down of
There we go.
1621. There were no permits for that. They just knocked it down and buried it in the ground. That's all I have to say. I'm just frustrated with the town of Islip, honestly.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for participating and providing your comments. Those are the only hands I see raised and or people designated to speak on this application. Not seeing anyone else pressing *9 or raising their hand. I'm going to close the public portion of this and now go to Tanner Gonzalez from staff. Oh, so do I have somebody else there? Does that look like Lynn O? Is there Lino?
Hello, I have a question. Have they tested for asbestos in the ground since they knocked down that house illegally and buried it in the ground, since that has all been done? And I also have to ask, what is to stop them from doing whatever they want after they get the permits for this property?
Okay,
What's
thank you.
to stop them from doing these outdoor revivals? What's to stop them from knocking more things down illegally without proper permits like they've done in the past? What is to stop these people from doing things they've already done in the past and gotten away with? Now that you're just allowing it to go on like nothing happened.
Thank you, Lynn, for providing those comments. We will get those answered as well, or we'll answer them for you when we go after the staff report. Those are all the people who have not yet spoken. At this point, I'm going to turn to Tana Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This residence AA zoned almost 2-acre site is currently improved with a single family dwelling in the southwest corner of the property along the street frontage on Manitowoc Boulevard, CO'd in 1951. Before its current property configuration, this was previously 2 lots, number 31 and 32, with another single family dwelling CO'd on lot 31 in 1950. That structure was demolished by the current applicant in 2013, and the lots were subsequently consolidated. The application before you tonight proposes an approximately 13,000 square foot church with adequate parking facilities, landscaping, site lighting, and the conversion of the existing single-family dwelling to a parsonage. 25-foot buffers are provided around the sides and rear of the property, except for the 15-foot side yard area where the parsonage already exists. As this is an existing condition, it does have merit to remain. However, technically the relaxation had to be formalized and asked for at the hearing. Overall and front yard landscaping relaxations are required. However, with the extensive buffer, the parsonage in the front yard, and requirement for a large amount of parking stalls to serve the use, this falls below the 20% and 10% requirement. There are 24 land bank stalls, which will provide physical green space on site, but cannot be counted towards the landscaping figure. In the future, if there are any overflow parking issues, these would be available for construction to solve any issues. There have been concerns from the public regarding prior tenting events being conducted on the premises. Research on the property card showed a complaint that was eventually closed out by the fire marshal's office when the owner afterwards applied for and was issued a tent permit. If the board feels it necessary, a condition can be added to prohibit the large outdoor gatherings. Based on the testimony heard, we'd like to go through and answer any of the questions that the public had. Conditions have been put together, which the applicant has agreed to, and any modifications we see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Ms. Trella, just to start off, does the church have a basement?
The basement, as of right now, what the interior plan shows is that it would be specifically used for offices for the administrative staff of the church, as well as 2 classrooms for Bible study.
Okay, and then one of the questions posed, I guess, and it's a real serious question for a residential neighborhood, is the noise level in outdoor gatherings. I know Mr. Gonzalez mentioned that in the past there was a 10 permit received for that, but if this were to be approved, would the applicant be opposed to a condition that prohibits large outdoor gatherings?
So I would like to address that. So there were several tent permits issued by the fire marshal's office, specifically within the summertime of the year. It did not happen year round. I would say at the very most, there were 3 specific events where they did obtain tent permits from the fire marshal's office. And, just to address that with the residences surrounding the church, they will not be holding any outdoor gatherings. The only reason that they had to apply for those tent permits is because the church itself is not built yet. Once it is built, those gatherings will be held inside of the building.
So you'd be okay with a condition to that effect?
Yes.
Okay, and the size of the congregation?
It's, I believe, a little over 250 parishioners. We do, like, as Tanner stated in his report, we do have adequate parking. It's actually, we're over the required parking.
So 250 parishioners, I guess you have 114 spots. Most people, are you saying carpool or families and or?
Yes, and they do have a large elderly congregation, so they do provide a van that picks up the parishioners and brings them over. So we should be perfectly okay with the parking. There shouldn't be any spillover.
Okay, and then either for Ms. Trello or for Tanner, anybody can speak about any of the environmental impact, anything that was done to assess the environmental impacts on this?
So the prior dwelling that was on the one that was demolished that the public had been speaking about, that was done with a permit, demo permit through the building division in 2013. It was completely signed off and sealed by the building division in December of 2013. There was asbestos testing as part of that by a registered third party, and it did meet the necessary requirements from the New York State DEC and health and safety and other required departments. So that had all been vetted as part of the demolition permit and was, inspected properly.
I'd also like to add that as part of the application with the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, we do soil testing. It has to go through pollution control, which will then check the samples to make sure that they either, if there was pollution present, that it's remedied properly. And if not, then it would only at that point pass through and head on for a permit. So it is going to be checked by other agencies as well.
Thank you. The other question, in terms of the structure itself, are there elevations or anything that shows the structure, the proposed structure?
Yes, they were a part of the application. There were building plans that were submitted, and I believe it's page
Is there anything that you
3.
can show up on the screen that's available on the screen, or just you only have?
Sure, yeah, I can try.
While you're trying to do that, I'm going to turn to any other board members to see if there are other questions that they have. Mr. Brown.
Sure.
Yes, Roxanne, what type of events does the church have besides just normal masses on a Saturday or a Sunday?
One of the events that was held was actually the pastor's daughter's wedding, which hopefully is a once-in-a-lifetime event. And the other was just a religious celebration. But other than that, like I said, all of the events will be held indoors, and that will not be an issue in the future.
Okay, is there any planned rentals or any rental income?
No.
And you mentioned that in the basement would be classrooms. What are those going to be used for?
That's more of like a Sunday school for children. It will be, I believe it's only going to be 1 or 2 nights a week.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, good.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Frugieri, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant be agreeable to a condition that puts restrictions on outdoor events?
Yes, we agreed to that. Mr. Chairman had asked if we would agree to a condition for no large outdoor gatherings.
Okay.
And just to follow up on Mr. Brown's one question, there's going to be no renting of the hall or anything like that for private parties or anything along those lines. It's just strictly for church purposes, and you're okay with the condition to that effect? There's no room in there that can be rented out?
I believe that the way that the basement is laid out, the offices are right in the middle of the basement, so there would be no space for it to be rented out. I would have to speak to the applicant to confirm that they're okay with putting a condition, but as far as the way the layout is, I don't see it being an issue.
Okay, I would just ask if you checked on the applicant. Obviously, the walls can come down later on if things don't work out and the whole floor plan can change, and we don't want to
Yes.
have that. Are there further questions from the board members? Ms. Trell, would you like to add anything else to the application? Were you able to, we were not able to get up the
I
elevations?
have, I do have them here. I don't know. This one here is the front of it.
Right.
Okay. This is the left side. And then this top one here is the rear. And then this one here shows the handicap ramp and the other side.
Thank you. And Ms. Trello, Mr.
I
Gonzalez?
do just have one other question. As far as if in the future they wanted to use it, let's say like, you know, he had his daughter's wedding there. If it's held indoors and there's adequate parking and it's not, you know, a weekly occurrence, it's a once in a blue moon occurrence, would that have to be placed as a condition on the covenants and restrictions?
Yeah, it would have to be placed in there for, put a condition in that it can't be rented out or it can't be used for other types of activities. I think Tana can work on language if we're going to approve this that may satisfy the board members as well as satisfy the applicant.
Okay.
Have with Tana to see if it'll meet the criteria that we have concerns about.
Okay.
And Tana or Ms. Trella, just so anybody watching this or here, the structure itself, the height of it compared to a residence in the area, can someone speak to that or put that in perspective?
I believe it's listed as 30 feet on the site plan. If you can take a look at that, Roxanne, and confirm, but I'm pretty sure it's at 30 feet.
Yes. Yes, you are correct.
And the maximum height for a residence in Res AA is 35. So that's below the maximum permitted threshold.
And Michelle, just to clarify your one point that you just raised, when you're saying a wedding, you're saying perform the wedding or rent the place out to actually have a reception there, just for the person to be married there and that's it?
No, to hold a reception there. I mean, I don't even know if this is something that they would want to do, but before placing such a condition, I would like to discuss it with them.
I would have reservations for reception purposes as one member of the board, certainly. I mean, perform wedding ceremonies there is one thing, and I think it's consistent with what a church does.
Yes.
You know, putting it into a catering facility in a residential neighborhood like that and bringing more people in and loud and the times of days and the rest would certainly be a concern that I would have, and I don't know about the fellow board members, but certainly is a concern that I would have.
Okay, but this doesn't restrict like activities that they would have normally. Like, for instance, some of the churches have breakfast with Santa after a family mass, you know, so they usually get together, they have, you know, Santa, they do a very small breakfast after the mass and then everyone goes home.
I think that, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that would be considered as part of the church's.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to get a kind of a clear grasp on the gatherings that we're going to be limiting.
Yeah, and again, I would suggest talking with Mr. Gonzalez about that and going through it and see, you know, the language could be circulated. We could take a look at it and see if we're comfortable with it.
Okay.
It is prepared to move forward on the application. Anything further from the board? Anything further from Ms. Trella?
No, thank you.
Oh, I don't see it here. I do see that there is someone who has their hand up. However, the public portion is closed on this. We will accept any further written comments that somebody would like to make after the fact. You can submit written comments to the town, send it to Mr. Gonzalez's attention. Mr. Gonzalez will go ahead and circulate those comments to us, and we'll consider them before we go ahead and make a decision on this application. That being said, if there's nothing else from the board, nothing else from the applicant, I will ask Mr. Brown if there's a motion.
Mr. Chairman, based on the staff report and the information that we still have to gather, I'm going to make a motion to reserve decision tonight.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to reserve the decision. Mr. Frugieri, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Frugieri. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The matter is reserved. Thank you. We're going to move on.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 2 on the agenda. Item 2 is site plan modification, public hearing. Jack Cipriano, SP 2018050, north side of East Suffolk Avenue, number 0, number 60, and number 64, and west side of Pineville Road, Central Islip. Applicant requests a buffer relaxation in connection with the construction of a new multi-tenant retail building. Is the applicant here and ready to go?
They're being brought in right now.
Okay.
Am I on?
Joseph, yes, your microphone is open. The floor is yours.
There we go. Okay. Good evening to the board. My name is Joseph Clemens, a partner within the firm German and Clemens Architecture PC, located at 3275 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite B11, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. First and foremost, I sincerely hope that each of you, along with those close to you, have remained safe and healthy during this unique pandemic. Although this Zoom meeting is kind of an unfamiliar territory for some, it is a relief to see progress made and hopefully puts us on a path back to some form of normalcy. Nevertheless, I am here speaking to you this evening in regards to the properties for 6064 East Suffolk Avenue, property tax map numbers 0500, 099, 01, 09, 10, and 11, located in central Islip. The combined parcels are approximately 0.42 acres and is located on the northwest corner of Suffolk Avenue and Pineville Road. As indicated, my client, Mr. Jack Cipriano, is here tonight to request a buffer relaxation in connection with the request for construction of a new multi-tenant retail building. Per town records, the site, which is zoned Business 1, currently consists of 2 single-family dwellings, one of which was built circa 1927 and the other in 1922. The third parcel, which is presently vacant, originally had a single-family dwelling, however, was demolished in 1969. Items are recognized by the town of Islip per their current certificate of occupancies. Per the town of Islip zoning code, a single-family detached dwelling and any accessory structure would require a special exception by the zoning board of appeals within Business 1 district, and realistically would not meet the required area density to accommodate even a single dwelling if such request was made today. The request, which is presented before you this evening, is considered an as-of-right use, as retail is permitted within the Business 1 zone. Due to the unique trapezoidal shape of the property, and after numerous design attempts, it was determined that the layout presented was efficient for the property and proposed use while still complying with the zoning criteria and subdivision and land development regulations. The height of the proposed building is 20 feet, well under the allowable 35 feet. The building would theoretically be allowed a floor area ratio of 40% of the lot, or approximately 7,200 square feet, while our proposal requests a total building area of only 2,996 square feet, or 16.6% respectively. After receiving comments from the town of Islip Engineering Department, it was also requested that we dedicate 8 feet to the town for Pineville Road widening. With doing so, our proposed plan still accommodates the required 10-foot front yard setback requirement from both Pineville Road and Suffolk Avenue. It should also be noted that while considering the buffer, our proposed plan still satisfies the front and total landscaping requirements with 18.2% front and 21.9% total, respectively. The reason which we are here discussing this proposal this evening is due to our request for a buffer relaxation from the property to the north for Pineville Road. This property is a split zone parcel of Business 1 and Residence B, however, is currently used by Central Islip Hop Hog Volunteer Ambulance Corps, an ambulance dispatch center, which is recognized as a commercial use. This facility has been in operation since 1980 and is one of the busiest ambulance services in Suffolk County. Their mission is to provide 24-hour emergency service to the communities of Central Islip, Hop Hog, and Islandia. The zoning code somewhat contradicts itself because it states that whenever any rear yard of a plot in a Business 1 district abuts a plot or plots in one or more residential use districts, the minimum required rear yard of the main building shall be 15 feet. Our proposed setback is approximately 15 feet to the proposed building. The exterior site improvements and parking, however, are to have a minimum area of 25 feet in width per section 6Q3 3.2 adjacent to any residential zone or use in accordance with the town land development regulations. As such, we respectfully requesting the relief to some of the required buffer to accommodate 2 parking stalls and the refuse enclosure. The parking stalls are set back approximately 15 feet from the property line, consistent with that of the building, while the refuse enclosure is approximately 6 foot 6 inches from the property. These locations have been strategically placed with the guidance and recommendations of the town of Islip's engineering department per their cursory review. To accommodate the buffer, a 6-foot-high buffer fence along with a double hedgerow of evergreen arborvitae shall be planted, along with red maple trees placed every 20 feet on center. I would also like to make a note that we decreased the overall building size slightly to accommodate the required parking so that no request for relaxation was required. As you can see from the plan set before you, my client is simply requesting to improve his property. These improvements requested will provide an as-of-right use, which will become a benefit to the community and enhance the aesthetic. New street trees and continuous use bushes will be added, which will enhance the look of the site and conform to the town of Islip standards. This will be a vast improvement from that of what it currently exists. As you can see, my client, Mr. Cipriano, wishes to establish and maintain a property of which conforms to the town of Islip requirements, while something which contextually fits in with the surrounding area, as there are numerous other commercial uses along Suffolk Avenue. Mr. Cipriano has been a resident in Central Islip since 1967 and is familiar with its history. Due to his intimate knowledge, he is proposing a building which he feels makes sense and is a fair request. As such, we respectfully request that you grant the site plan relaxation presented before you today so we can continue to enhance the Central Islip community. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. If that concludes your application, I would like to go to the public comment section, then we can come back for a staff report and some questions from the board.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Go to the participant list to see who we have that like to speak. I see we have Debbie Kavanaugh. Did we lose Debbie Kavanaugh? We lost Debbie Kavanaugh. We have
no, Debbie, the floor is yours. Her microphone was muted.
Oh,
Debbie?
can you hear me or do I have to unmute myself?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. One of my concerns which has been my concern before with the 1,500 plus units of housing going in throughout all the development in Central Islip. Every planning or traffic study that has been done on what's currently is to what they're doing. There has not been a comprehensive traffic study done, which is overall concerning to me and the residents on safety for the community and the residents not being hurt. It's a concern for my first responders, the ambulance corps, the fire department, that I seem to have been ignored by the town when I've sat there so far and have said, we need a comprehensive traffic study done, because everybody's been doing single traffic studies on what roads conditions are now, but nobody has bothered to take the formula to multiply it out with 150 housing units with the additional stores going in, and then a comprehensive traffic study. So I do think that it behooves the planning board to make sure that a complete traffic study is done with the total amount of proposed plane that's coming in for the future, and not do it piecemeal. That's the way it's been done up until this point. I do support the ambulance corps, and they're concerned about getting out and being safe for their volunteers and their workers. I think as a community resident and a longtime resident of Central Islip, you need to take the lives of our first responders and how much time they need to respond to where they're supposed to get without being delayed by any commercial businesses that are going into the area. And if anything, if the commercial business is still going into there, maybe it needs to be a smaller building where we're not having as much traffic. So that's my concern, and that's what I'm addressing.
Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. Thanks for your participation. Jonathan Kriklava.
Hello, can you folks hear me?
Yes.
There we go, thank you. Hello, my name is Jonathan Kriklava. I'm Chief of Department over at the Central Islip Pop-Hog Ambulance. So with this development, my main concern is basically the safety and response for my membership. This area is our main response area where we're going off of Pineville Road to Suffolk Avenue. And my concern is with this commercial building that we're going to be building up more traffic, also building up some, I guess, visual disturbances with being able to respond and actually see different cars coming through. So I think our concern is just having good sight and being able to respond safely. And we're concerned that if this development starts to build up, we're going to have that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, I mean, are you opposed to the construction at all, or constructing in a way that would give you better sight lines, or just to be more specific on your?
We are opposed to the construction due to the fact that it will build up more traffic in the area, and it'll build up more. We won't be able to visually, we won't be able to have the correct views as we're exiting Pineville Road in an emergency manner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Ryan.
Paul, your mic is open.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Ryan, the chairman of the Central Islip Pop-Hog Volunteer Ambulance Corps. Just following up on the chief's previous statements. Department is the second busiest department in the state. We do approximately 7,000 calls a year. The lion's share of our calls, about 80%, exit onto Pineville Avenue. We're opposed to this construction because of the increased risk to our members, not only responding, but the ambulances leaving out onto Pineville Road. We do have a retail establishment on the northeast side that already is posing problems for us when exiting on the road. Several years back, approximately 15 years back, the town was supposed to put a traffic light in to control traffic for us to exit onto Suffolk Avenue. That never came to fruition. We have seen several accidents on this corner. We're just worried that there's going to be an increased risk, an increased exposure to the department when responding to calls, the members coming to the department for calls, and just general pedestrians walking up and down the sidewalks there. So again, following up the chief's statement, we are opposed to this construction.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. We will address some of those comments. And I think on the traffic light at Suffolk Avenue is a county road. And I will also ask our staff to follow up on what happened with that, or if there is plans for a traffic light to be put in by the county. But thank you very much for taking the time and giving us your opinion on this application.
Thank you.
Those are all the all the public comments I see right now. If anybody's on the phone and would like to be heard, you can hit *9 right now and we will allow you to speak. Or raise hand if you're on a device and would like to speak. If I don't see anyone else, I'm not seeing anyone else who would like to speak at this point. So I'm going to turn this matter over to Tana Gonzalez to give us a report from the Town of Islip Planning Department. Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This business one zoned approximately 0.42 acre property is currently comprised of 3 separate lots, 2 of which are improved with single family dwellings, CO'd in 1922 and 1927. Those structures, along with the rear yard garage, would be demolished and the property is consolidated in order to construct an approximately 3,000 square foot multi-tenant retail building with related site improvements. The prior call of the meeting included a parking relaxation. However, since the notice was published, the applicant was able to reduce the size of the building, as Mr. Clemens stated, and relocate the refuse enclosure to free up more parking stalls, eliminating the need for that relaxation. Now only a buffer relaxation is required as part of this application. Technically, a 25-foot buffer is required along the northern property line, as the adjacent lot is split zone Residence B and Business 1, but it is owned and operated by the Central Islip Volunteer Ambulance Facility, which is a commercial use, not a residential use. The proposed building will maintain 15 feet to that northern property line. However, the necessary refuse enclosure is 6.5 feet off that line. Ideally, it should be moved further away. However, engineering staff has worked through multiple configurations with the applicant on placement to increase the green space behind the enclosure, and there does not appear to be many options. The buffer would not be screening anything for residential use, as the ambulance facility maintains their parking lot almost on the property line, with their refuse enclosure close by as well. Although staff does not foresee this happening anytime soon, we did recommend the applicant provide a perpetual offer of cross-access / shared parking with the ambulance property if anything were to change, so that future connectivity could be achieved. 3 letters were received by staff from the Central Islip Coalition of Good Neighbors, the Central Islip Hop Hog Volunteer Ambulance Corp, and the Central Islip Civic Council. Their concerns were generally as follows. The increase of vehicle and pedestrian traffic, coupled with a very narrow Pineville Road, the hindering of emergency response times, and disruption of the line of sight for their vehicles. Based on those letters, the town's traffic consultant reviewed the site plan and stated the project will generate relatively low traffic volumes, have little or no impact on emergency vehicle operations, as it will have no access to Pineville Road, and that the driveway being located as far as possible from the corner and the perpetual offer of cross access are both beneficial. The town's Division of Traffic Safety reviewed the site plan as well and stated the proposal meets the minimum required parking stalls on site. In order to address the concerns of the community groups, they recommend the existing parking restrictions on both sides of Pineville Road from 250 north of Suffolk Avenue to Suffolk Avenue be amended from a no standing anytime restriction to a more restrictive no stopping at any time restriction. Should the application be granted, they will move forward with the above noted recommendation and monitor the location for any additional adjustments. Staff would like to hear any additional comments or concerns regarding the buffer relaxation first, and any other comments on the application before crafting conditions and potentially bringing this application back for a decision at a later date.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Do you know, are there any plans to Ms. Kavanaugh's questions for a comprehensive traffic study for the Central Islip community in that area?
I don't know firsthand. I'd have to confer with the planning division and find out, but I could find an answer to that question and get back.
Yeah, could you do that and get back to us? I know there are a lot of new developments that are going up there, both rental and condos. That would be good for us to know as well. Can you just speak to two things for me, and I'll turn it over to the board. As of right now, if they would have to bring that dumpster back in and not get the relaxation, what could go on there as of right without even coming before us?
So, you know, the retail use is obviously an as of right use. They could have that. The only reason they're technically before the board tonight is because they do need that buffer relaxation. You know, because they did get rid of the parking problem by adjusting the size of the building. Have to look up specifically what the uses would be in business one, but usually it's, you know, like commercial uses, retail stores, personal service, stuff like that. But, you know, the proposed use is an as of right use for the area.
Are there questions from other board members? Mr. Brown?
My main concern is safety on the Pineville Road. And it's something that I think that I definitely want to look further into. Both the chief and Mr. Ryan spoke with that. I didn't realize that there was that many calls. 80% of their calls are number 2 in the state on calls are right there on that up that road. So that's something I think that we should really consider.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Further questions from the board, Mr. Frugieri?
Yeah, I just have two questions. Tana, when you say that a retail use is as of right, is this in an as of right situation, fully complying without any buffer relaxations, wouldn't the square footage be less than 3,000 square feet?
Can you, I'm sorry, Brian, can you, I'm just trying to understand your question as far as the size of the building.
Well, the use of a retail use is as of right in this zone on this particular parcel. But is the size of the building in a retail use permitted as of right? Or would it have to be a reduced size?
Nope. So the building size they currently have is well under, you know, the maximum permitted for the zone. As Mr. Clemens stated, you know, the max would be 40%. They're less than half of that. So the size of their building is not an issue. They have adequate parking for, you know, what's required as far as the town code. So, you know, the building that they are proposing, you know, is a as of right use size and use wise.
And the second question is, the traffic is going out onto Suffolk Avenue, which is a county road. Has Suffolk County DPW reviewed this?
Yes, they were notified, as we are required by law to notify them, you know, with the 239F form, and they did reply. You know, they do basically a preliminary approval of the site plans that we send. So basically that gives the applicant the ability to contact their office and apply for the necessary permits as far as any, you know, road work that would be done or anything that the county deems necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Frugieri. Mr. Gonzalez, just to follow up on Mr. Frugieri's question, which I think is the same as mine, I think the answer might be a little different. Just maybe let me try and clarify the question. If the as of right without the approval of the buffer relaxation, what size the building's square footage would have to be reduced to meet the parking requirements? So they could not have 3,000 square feet without either a parking relaxation or a buffer relaxation?
Oh, I think I see what you're saying. So basically, because the building itself is still technically in the buffer, is that what you're saying? So if in order to meet a fully compliant buffer, you would have to reduce the size of the building. Is that what you're saying, basically?
That would be the question, right? In order to be
Okay.
compliant as of right, would not coming before us at all, the building would have to be smaller square footage wise.
Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but yeah, if that were the case, in order to avoid any type of buffer relaxation, the building would either have to be reconfigured as far as lengthwise in a different layout, or shrunk down to a smaller size.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno.
Mr. Gonzalez, I'm curious about this. The ambulance corps as a use is considered commercial. Is it permitted in a residential zone?
Well, they are split zoned business 1 and res B, so they are permitted to.
Well, that's the problem I'm having here, is that it's one and the other. For the purposes of their use, we're saying they're commercial. But for the purpose of the neighboring property, we're saying they're residential, and so they have to have this buffer. It seems unfair to the applicant to apply both criteria. You're saying, oh yeah, they're commercial, so it's okay that the ambulance corps is there. But the fact that they're but now when we talk about it the other way, we're saying, no, you have to, because it's split zoned, you have to have the residential buffer. Which way is it?
Yeah, that is correct. So basically, it's a commercial use. The zoning line is kind of at a weird diagonal angle. So technically, it would by code, they are any commercial use abutting them would have to require a buffer. But from a realistic standpoint, you're not buffering any residential use. So it depends on how we want to handle it, but it's not a typical residential property that needs to be buffered. That's correct.
Well, my point is that it's being de facto considered commercial, that though it's split zoned, it's been handled purely as a commercial property. And so I'm having difficulty with the fact that the ambulance corps, and by the way, I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. Obviously, I admire the ambulance corps. They do wonderful work. There's no question about that. This is not about the ambulance corps. I'd be saying the same thing of any commercial use abutting them. Is the point is that there's a commercial use abutting them. That's all been recognized as a commercial use. Nobody's debating that. And yet we're applying a residential standard to the adjacent property. I just think that's just not a fair way to handle it.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. I'm going to turn to Mr. Matamore.
Comes to mind in what we've heard tonight is that the function of the ambulance corps in responding to emergencies is very similar, I would think, to the fire departments. And I'm familiar with, for example, the fire department down in East Islip, and years ago when the fire department was in Bay Shore, there have been a workout where a light would be put there for emergency purposes only. It wouldn't be the light that perhaps was discussed earlier in this meeting at Pineville, but certainly the concerns, and I agree with Mr. Bruno's comments, there's no question that these emergency people and their safety is absolutely has to be considered. But I'm wondering if, and I mentioned this to Tanner and perhaps to the applicant, that has that been looked into? I realize it's a county road. If it was an Islip town road, that might be somewhat different. It's a county road, but it sounds to me like this ambulance service has some major clout or reputation statewide for the number of emergencies they respond to. So if clout has anything to do with it and the like, perhaps I just throw that out as an idea that may help to solve or ameliorate the safety concern, which certainly is something that we would need to consider when we make our decision.
Thank you, Mr. Matamore. Anything from the board? To the applicant, anything you'd like to add? Has the applicant met with the neighbor, the ambulance corps, to discuss any of this or go over the plan?
I personally have not. I'm not sure if my client specifically has. I can find out and see exactly what conversations have been had. I do want to make a point. I know somebody had said that Pineville Road is fairly narrow. I do want to just make note that part of this application is for the widening. So we would be dedicating 8 feet of our property to the town of Islip for the road widening of Pineville. And in regards to the actual opening to get into our parking lot, as Tanner had said, we are pretty much the furthest most part of our property and pretty much in the same location as one of the driveways would have been at the residence. And the residents that are on site now are both 2 stories in height. So if people are concerned about sight lines and heights, I don't necessarily find that a fair response, just because our building height is probably similar to what's currently there now.
Thank you. And that's what's my point, Ms. Clemens. I think if you were to schedule a meeting with, or your client would schedule a meeting with the Central Islip Volunteer Ambulance Corps to see exactly that, you're proposing to widen the road and where things are at, get some feedback from them.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it.
Discussion. Anything you'd like to add further, Ms. Clemens?
Nope, that would be it.
Okay. Not seeing anything further, I'm going to turn to Mr. Bruno for a motion.
I make a motion that we reserve decisions so that all these items we've discussed can be investigated.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. There's a motion by Mr. Bruno to reserve decision. Is there a second, Mr. Matamore? Just turn your mic on.
Yes, I'd second that motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There's a second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor of reserving decision?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? We're reserved. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you again. We're going to go to item 3 on the agenda. Anybody who might be joining the meeting late, I just want to point out, if you are joining the meeting now and you'd like to speak on one of the public hearings that are going on this evening, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A button. If you click on that Q&A button, you can enter your name, your address, and the actual item you'd like to speak on, and somebody will get back to you and put you up for that item so that we know you want to speak on that item. If you're dialing on a phone, when that public hearing comes up, I'll ask you to press *9 on your phone so you can let us know you'd like to speak at that point. But also just want to remind everybody that the public hearing section, that each speaker is entitled to 3 minutes. We'll let you know if you're getting close to those 3 minutes. But we're going to go to item 3 on the agenda. Item 3 on the agenda, Planning Board Public Hearing, Robert Peralta, PB 2020-004, west side of Wheeler Road, County Route 17, 720.26 feet south of Motor Parkway, County Route 67, Central Islip, 112A Wheeler Road. Applicant requests a modification of Planning Board special permit conditions associated with TC 4743 and PB 2012-047 in order to increase the size of an existing bar, tavern, or nightclub. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, members of the board. I'm James Wandell from Todd O'Connell Architects, and I'm here representing our client, Robert Peralta of 112A Wheeler Road in Central Islip. Our client is taking over the adjacent tenant space and wants to expand his existing bar, tavern, nightclub into the space. With this, we are requesting a site modification, planning board special permit conditions associated with TC 4743 and PB 2012-047 in order to increase the size of the existing bar, tavern, or nightclub. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the public hearing section, and we'll probably come back with questions from the members of the board. I don't see anybody in the attendee list. I don't see anybody listed in the panelist list. Is anybody at this point who would like to speak on this application? If you're on the call by phone, please press *9 on your phone now. If you're on video, you can hit the raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. I'm not seeing anyone who wishes to speak, so we'll turn to Ms. Wozniak to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on Wheeler Road in Central Islip, adjacent to the Vanderbilt Shopping Plaza and the Central Islip Fire District. The property is improved with a 5,300 square foot building with 2 tenant spaces. The existing club tenant space obtained a special permit in 2006, limiting the use to 2,295 square feet and 135 seats, and then obtained a modification of those conditions in 2012 to permit an expansion to 3,096 square feet and 187 seats. Tonight, the applicant is requesting to further expand the club into the entire building for a total floor area of 5,322 square feet with 202 seats. This request will require an extensive parking relaxation. In addition, a majority of the conditions originally imposed in 2006 were never met. The conditions required a site plan to be submitted to the engineering division, buffer plantings, street trees, an upgraded facade, and upgraded signage. The applicant began the process of complying with the conditions in 2008 by submitting a site plan. However, the site plan was never approved and the improvements were never completed. Planning recommends the board reserve decision to allow the applicant time to submit plans showing the required site improvements, facade changes, and proposed signage changes. Planning also recommends the applicant provide a written agreement with the owner of the Vanderbilt Plaza property to allow employees and patrons to park on the neighboring property due to the substantial parking relaxation.
Thank you. So, Ms. Wozniak, just to clarify, the property in question is a separate owner. The applicant is the owner of the property as well?
I'd have to double check.
Wendell, are you the owner of the club as well as the owner of the property?
I am not. I work for the architecture firm. The owner of the club does not own the property. He's just renting the space.
Got it. And Ms. Wozniak or Mr. Wendell, has anybody spoken to the owner of the property regarding the serious issues that Ms. Wozniak has raised that go back quite some time?
I spoke with them today, and any of the conditions that need to be upgraded, we can, to meet the conditions, we would submit a plan showing all that to be done.
I would certainly say from my perspective, I mean, I'm one always outspoken to anyone who's come before this board who has previous conditions or previous things they were supposed to do on a site and have never complied with them, that they even come back before us to propose something new while not complying with the original one. So
he originally wasn't the one to go for the original hearing. He's a new owner.
Okay, well, please have him certainly check with Ms. Wozniak so she can go through what's outstanding on the property so we can get those addressed, and then we can look back at the parking relaxation at that point. But I wouldn't honestly explore that until we knew that the original conditions were met. I'm going to turn to other board members for any questions they might have. Any questions from other board members?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
For Jerry, go ahead.
5,000 square feet is a pretty large area for a bar, tavern, nightclub. Does the applicant have any other similar facilities on the island that he
Not that I'm
operates?
aware of.
I'm just going to see if he has a track record or something that we can look at as far as experiences with problems, because a 5,000 square foot bar is a fairly substantial size establishment.
He said he does. He just texted me.
He does.
He does own other properties, yes. He does
Okay.
lease other properties.
Well, I'd like to have him submit a list of his properties to planning so that we can sort of get a sense of whether there's other problems in other communities with his establishments.
That's not a problem.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Ferruccio? Okay, I see his mic went silent. Mr. Brown, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Just to follow up with Mr. Ferrajari's questioning too. And Tanner or Sean, would we have any problems or any submittals to the town or any complaints to the town on the property?
Hi, this is Sean Colgan. I can take a quick look at the property card to see if there's any violations. There may not be sufficient detail to give you information right now. Otherwise, we can follow up with public safety to hear if they've received anything.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Anything further from the board? Not seeing anything. Does the applicant wish to add anything further?
I would actually. The owner of this property also owns the strip mall property next to it, adjacent. He's also agreed to let the client use parking spaces there to accommodate some extra parking that would be required.
Thank you. We'll take that into consideration. Ms. Wozniak, you have that? Do they have sufficient parking next door for their regular use? Do you know?
I did look into that, but it's a pretty big shopping center, and from aerial photos, it seems like it's pretty vacant most of the time. So they probably do have sufficient parking, but I can take a check.
Thank you. Anything further from the applicant?
That's it.
Thank you. So if you can just certainly get back to Ms. Wozniak regarding, or speak to the landlord about complying with everything that's outstanding, and then certainly to Mr. Frugieri's question, if you can provide that information so the board can review that.
That's not a problem.
Thank you. If
Thank
there's
you.
nothing further from the board, is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would move to close the hearing and reserve decision.
Motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the hearing and reserve decision. Mr. Musumeci, is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Musumeci. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? We're reserved. Thank you all very much. We're going to go to item 4 on the agenda. Planning Board Public Hearing, Brian Campbell, Elizabeth Campbell, PB 2020-008, west side of Foster Avenue, 417.16 feet south of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A, Sayville, 32 Foster Avenue. Applicant requests a Planning Board special permit for a minor restaurant in the Business 1 District pursuant to 68-272.1A. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. Is the applicant here?
Hello.
Good evening. When you're ready, go ahead. Just state your name for the record.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, John Bracco, architect.
Go ahead, Mr. Bracco.
Yes, good evening. John Bracco, architect for the applicant, Brian and Elizabeth Campbell. We are seeking a special permit for a minor restaurant with 8 seats, whose primary function would be as a fast food establishment. The owner's vision is for some sort of ice cream / coffee / dessert type establishment, but that is not yet etched in stone. What we do know is that, again, the primary function would be quick food to go. The existing building is a small 1-story structure, just over 800 square feet, which according to town regulations, we have to round up to 900 square feet, which in turn requires 9 parking spaces. The existing parking lot, with the addition of a handicap stall, can only produce 5 spaces. This property's last use was as an animal hospital, for which a change of zone and ZBA grant were issued in 1983. The animal hospital was in operation for many years. The former animal hospital, which is a medical use according to the code, required a minimum of 8 parking spaces. This property functioned for several years previously, with more than likely the employees parking in the parking lot. So this property, like most properties in and around the Main Street Sayville area, is not unfamiliar with being parking challenged. We are very sensitive and have been very proactive on the parking issue. On that note, I would like to make the board aware that we have submitted a letter of agreement from the Reverend Raymond J. Bagnuolo from the Sayville Congregational United Church of Christ, located at 131 Middle Road in Sayville, which does abut the subject parcel on the southwest corner of the property. The letter states that the Reverend will designate 3 spaces in his adjacent parking lot for the employees of the future business at the subject parcel. Based on the limited size of the proposed establishment, there would not be a need for more than 3 people working at any one time, therefore assuring that the proposed 5 spaces would be for customers of the establishment only. There would be a gate and a walkway, as shown on the proposed site plan, that would connect the church's parking lot to the back door of the proposed establishment. The town of Islip subdivision and land regulations require 9 spaces for this type of use and square footage. But there is no additional requirement for employees, meaning the 9 spaces required are for both customers and employees. And with 3 employees needed for the size of the establishment, it means only 6 spaces for customers. Now that we've ensured that the employees will not be parking in the subject parcel parking lot, we are actually only 1 parking spot off from what would have been left for customers. I would like to add, just on a personal note in regards to the parking, I've had my office in downtown, Main Street, Sayville, for over 10 years, and we all know what the parking issues are, but everybody is sort of used to it. We use the municipal lots. The office that I rented up until just a few months ago, it was a property that was 2 retail establishments on the first floor, 2 offices on the second floor. It had 0 parking, and we relied on the municipal spots. People come to Sayville, they park in the municipal lots, and they go from store to store. They'll stroll from one end of town to the other. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, it's not like Sunrise Highway where 100% of the people visiting an establishment are coming by car. People walk in Sayville, people bike from their homes to establishments. And, there are restaurants in Sayville, full sit-down, full-service restaurants that the property has 0 parking, and they rely exclusively on the municipal lot. So, the fact that we're providing 5 spaces, we feel, is not a bad thing. In regards to the buffer relaxation on the southerly property line, this parcel has been CO'd as a commercial use adjacent to a residential use since 1985. We are proposing to increase the distance from the existing parking to the southerly property line from 2 feet to 5 feet, therefore providing enough room for some sort of hedges to provide screening to the adjacent parcel to the south. There are already some trees on the property to the south of the parking lot, which does provide some screening. And it is approximately 80 feet from the subject parcel from the subject parcel to the structure to the southerly, adjacent to the southerly property line. Finally, in regards to the front yard landscape relaxation, we have actually increased the front landscape area relaxation from the existing 5.6% to just over 7% by increasing the buffer on the south side of the property. In addition, I just wanted to note that we have already met with Suffolk County Wastewater Management. We had a positive meeting with them as far as the density and the flow rates. It looks like that it would not be an issue to issue a permit for this type of establishment. And I just wanted to thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Just one thing that you brought up, you said you're not sure the type of actual retail establishment going in there. Do you have examples of what we're talking about? Are we talking the Chipotle type of place? Are we talking more?
As of right now, the owner, as I stated in the beginning, his idea was maybe some sort of ice cream / coffee / dessert pastry type of thing. But it's not etched in stone, but it would be something along those lines. Okay. The place is tiny. It's only 800 square feet.
Thank you. I do not see anybody on here that has, or do I see anybody that wants to speak on this application? I do not see anybody listed there. If there's anybody who's on the phone that would like to speak on this application, you can hit *9 on your phone now to let us know you'd like to speak, and we can allow you to speak. If you're on the Zoom application on the screen, you can hit the raise your hand at the bottom at this point, and we can allow you to speak at this point. I'm not seeing anyone who would like to speak on this application, so I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak to give us a report.
Thank you. The subject property is located on the west side of Foster Avenue, approximately 417 feet south of Montauk Highway in Sayville. The property is currently improved with an 833 square foot building, which was last used as a vet's office. Tonight, the applicant is looking to convert the former office space into a minor restaurant with 16 seats. This conversion will increase the required parking for the building and will require a 44% parking relaxation. There will be no increase in the gross floor area, and most of the site will remain as is. However, a buffer and front yard landscaping relaxation will need to be formalized. The applicant has proposed to increase the existing buffer and provide a 5-foot vegetated buffer and the required fencing along the southern property line. In addition, the applicant has decreased the proposed seating to 8 seats in order to gear the restaurant more toward takeout to help with the parking relaxation. The applicant has also provided a letter from the adjacent church to the south stating that employees may utilize 3 parking stalls in the church parking lot. It is important to note that the church does have another parking agreement with the mixed-use building to the east, and it will need to be verified that the church has adequate parking for its own use. At this point, it's unclear what type of restaurant will be the tenant, but in the future, any small business or even chain restaurant could be permitted. Therefore, planning recommends the board reserve decision to allow staff time to draft appropriate conditions based on the comments heard tonight and to obtain a more formalized parking agreement with the church.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. I'm going to go to Mr. Brown for questions.
Oh, yes. First of all, Mr. Bracco, when you did your opening statement, you mentioned there was 8 seats, and then Ms. Wozniak right now was just stating there's 16. Which is it?
No, I believe Ms. Wozniak did say 8.
Yeah, I said they originally proposed 16, but they realized that the parking relaxation was high, so they cut the seats in half in order to help with that and gear it more toward a takeout restaurant so customers aren't staying there long.
Okay, is this a type of restaurant would you be serving alcohol?
I don't believe so. Like I said, it's not 100% etched in stone what exactly the concept will be yet. But like I said, if it does stick along the line of ice cream coffee type place, I would say no, but I can't say with 100% certainty that if the concept does change, there could be that possibility.
Right,
I don't think it would be anything, I don't think it would be anything like liquor. I mean, let's say it was a pizzeria, I know some pizzerias do have, they'll have, bottles of beer you can take out. I don't think it would be anything more than that.
Right, because I just trying to clarify what we would be voting on. And I personally have lived in Sayville 37 years. I know you said you had your office down the block for 10 years. And that street there, if you think about the amount of buses that get on the land then with all the weddings, you look about, for the caravan that comes from the train station with buses and taxis running down to the Fire Island ferries in the summer, it's a really busy street and a hub. And it's very short from Montauk Highway to the Middle Road Light, where it's not a very big queue. So it's a very, very busy strip. That's why I'm concerned if it's going to be a restaurant with alcohol. I am happy to hear that it's only going to be 8 seats, which does limit it down. But I do have some concerns with the traffic in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Bruno?
I have to agree with Mr. Brown on this, and my concern, Mr. Bracco, is only, while I understand that there's not going to be that many seats, when you talk about takeout, you are talking about something that's usually a pretty heavy traffic generator. So I just want to let you know that I have some concerns because you are going to put, I think, more than the seat number, no matter what kind of, depends upon the time of takeout, but takeouts generally are people going in and out much faster than a sit-down restaurant. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, yeah, may I respond?
Absolutely.
Of course.
Okay, yes. Yeah, it's, in a way, it's sort of a double-edged sword, there's limited parking, so we feel with takeout that, yes, while there could be more cars, the people come in and out much quickly than if it was more of a sit-down establishment and those 5 spaces are being used by 5 cars for an hour. So I understand the concerns with the traffic, and I do agree in the summer, I see those buses going back and forth from the train station. I would say, yeah, that, July and August, that is a busy street. The rest of the months of the year, not as bad. So yeah, it's one of those, double-edged sword things. Like I said, we thought takeout would be a better concept just as far as people coming in and out quickly and not using the spaces for very long.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Mr. Bracco, just to ask sort of the similar questions to Mr. Brown and Mr. Bruno, my concern becomes the parking. There's, I believe, no stopping, no standing, no waiting or anything like that along the front of the business on either side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to put employees in the parking lot. I'm not sure where the nearest actual municipal lot is for people to park.
Yeah.
I mean, how does it become a viable business for you if, you know, half the parking spots or almost half are taken up by the employees based on how small it is, which essentially gives you 2 or 3 spots or 3 spots for customers to use?
Well, Chairman Friedland, as I mentioned, we did have an agreement with the church, which is adjacent to the southwest, that they would give us 3 spaces for the employees. And as I stated, with the size of this establishment, there really wouldn't be a need for more than 3 employees at a time. So we feel like the 5 spaces that we're providing would be exclusively for the customers of the establishment.
And you think 5 spaces is sufficient for to sustain the business? And then we'll answer that first. Go ahead.
I believe so. According to the owner and the conversations I've had with him, he does believe that the 5 spaces would be enough.
Okay. And Ms. Wozniak, you said related to the church parking earlier. That's why I didn't put it in there, that you need to check with them to see if they're underparked, overparked, or what the case was. Is that what you need to check on?
Yeah, it seems like the mixed-use building to the east of the church has a similar agreement where they're utilizing some of the church parking spaces. So we just need to make sure that the church itself has enough and make sure they're not leasing out too many of their own spots. And basically we want to make sure that both this restaurant and the church have enough parking, if that's going to be the case, that the employees will park there.
So there's just a clarification we'll get, Mr. Brock. I think if it meets the requirements that they currently have, whatever they've leased out or cross access to the other property, then the 3 would fit there and it would give you 5 spots. Whether or not that's enough, I guess, is a question we have to ponder or decide on as the board. Are there further questions from the board?
I just have a comment. I think between now and the time we make a decision on this, it would be nice to get a little further clarification on what type of restaurant this is. When you're limited to just 5 parking spaces, the type of restaurant is critical to our decision. You want to try to get a restaurant that caters more to heavy foot traffic than vehicular traffic.
Yep, we can work on that.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Mr. Brock, would you like to add anything further?
Not at this time, no. Thank you.
And I know you said you had a letter from the Reverend, I believe, at the church. If you want to submit that as part of the record, if we don't have it, please feel free to submit that. We will make that officially part of the record.
I believe you should have it. I did email it to Kelly.
I have a copy of it.
Great. Thank you. We do have a copy. Disregard my request for you to submit.
No problem.
If there's nothing further from the board, nothing further from the applicant, I'll ask who's my lucky person. Mr. Frugier, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion that we close this hearing and reserve decision to get answers to the questions that were asked tonight.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Frugier to close the hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second, Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, there is a second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor of closing the public hearing and reserving decision, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The public hearing is closed and we are reserved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Next item on the agenda, item 5, Town Board Application, Public Hearing, Mark Lessing, CZ 2020-011, southeast side of Consuelo Place, number 3, approximately 403 feet south of Shore Drive, Oakdale, 3 Consuelo Place. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 4493 to increase the maximum size of the building in order to install a canopy over an existing outside seating area. Good evening, is the applicant here?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Rick Bartlett, architect and principal at BAR Architects, located at 190 Motor Parkway, Suite 201 in Hauppauge. We're here before you this evening to amend the CNRs associated with TC 4493 for property located at 3 Consuelo Place in Oakdale, which is also known as the View Restaurant. Our application seeks to add an open canopy structure over an existing approved outdoor patio seating area. The canopy counts towards building area and therefore requires an amendment to the previous CNRs for the quote-unquote increased building area. Setbacks, FAR, and maximum height of the structure comply with town zoning, and there are no proposed changes to seating capacity, landscaping, and parking provisions which were previously approved under the subject TC. As such, we respectfully request approval of the proposed amended CNRs that will allow the installation of the proposed canopy.
Thank you. I do not see anybody here who wishes to speak on this application. If anybody would like to speak on this application and you're just joining us or you join later after I made my last announcement, please, if you're on the phone, hit *9 now. That'll let us know you'd like to speak. If you're on the app itself on the screen, please hit the raise your hand feature. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As stated by the applicant, these covenants were proposed in 1999 with limited the size of the structure. Sean, could you please unmute your mic, please?
I did. Thank you. Start all over.
Gotta call him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As stated by the applicant, the covenants were imposed in 1999 that limited the size of the structure to 9,945 square feet. As per the town zoning inspector, the addition of the canopy increases the gross floor area beyond what was originally permitted and thus could not conform with the covenant. As the outside seating area is not fundamentally changing, being that it is seasonal in nature, and it will not be entirely enclosed, much as it is now, the staff does not foresee any adverse impacts from the structural addition. Based on the minor modification and the improvements, the staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to the attached modified covenants.
Thank you. There are questions from the board? Mr. Bruno?
There's no intent to enclose this, right? This just stays an open trellis, Mr.
Correct.
Bartlett?
Correct.
Mr. Colgan, it doesn't appear that the covenants actually say that. Am I missing it somewhere?
They don't say it. I didn't think it really needed to be, but if the board wants to be a little cautious here, we can certainly say that the outside seating portion will remain unenclosed.
I'd like to see it. I don't know if the other board members feel the same.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Any support for Mr. Bruno's amendment to the covenants and restrictions?
I would agree with Mr. Bruno.
Okay. I would agree.
Me too.
It seems to be a majority in agreement with that. Mr. Bartlett, obviously you're okay with that based upon your answer, correct?
Correct.
Anything further from the board? The applicant like to add anything further?
The only thing I would say is that, the owner of the facility has already agreed to the previous CNRs. We've submitted signed copies of those. So if there are amendments that are going to be made to that, I'm sure there won't be a problem in getting those signed and then back to the town as well.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Bruno to make the motion so he can include the new covenant and restriction that he'd like to add in there.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the application with the addition to the covenants that the new structure will not be enclosed and will remain an open structure.
Motion by Mr. Bruno to approve the application with the current covenants and restrictions with the new one that the new structure will remain open, not closed. Is that correct?
And yes, and that we're also accepting the new covenant as written by planning that's already been submitted by Mr. Bartlett. It's an amendment to that covenant.
Motion as stated by Mr. Bruno. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Ferrugiari. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Town Board Application, Public Hearing, R Squared Bayshore LLC, CZ 2020-010, northeast corner of Oak Street and Fifth Avenue, County Route 13, Bayshore, number 22 Oak Street, number 91 Fifth Avenue. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 5268 in order to decrease the number of apartment units and decrease the minimum gross floor area required for a commercial use. Is the applicant here?
Yes, Guy Germano for the applicant, 4250 Veterans Memorial Highway, Holbrook, New York. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I thank you for hosting this special meeting, considering these unusual times. This application is by R Squared Bayshore LLC, a Reckler affiliated company. it requests the modification of CNRs associated with TC 5268, which were recorded and required as a result of a change of zone granted in May 2017 from Industrial 1 to Downtown PDD for a mixed use commercial and residential building. We're here today is kind of a little bit unusual, and we're requesting less, and that's what this application is about. Can I? I want to put up. Yes. Okay. Can you see the zoning data that I put up?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Before I go through that, I just want to make sure everyone, or just familiarize everyone with the location if you're not already familiar with it. The property is located on the corner of 5th Avenue and Oak Street in Bayshore, and it borders the Long Island Railroad on the south and the railroad parking lot. It's owned by the town, I believe, on the east. And you can see with the aerial photograph what exists on the site now, and I'm showing you here. This is the outline of the property that is the subject of this particular application. And just so we are familiar with the entire application, we're not, the change of zone previously granted approval for a parking lot associated with the residential development here, and also again on the other side of Oak Street here. Now, though these nothing's changed with regard to that, those two grants with different covenants. So, just very briefly going through this, the previous plan had a floor area ratio of 3.22. That was an error. The new plan proposes a floor area ratio of 2.5, which is permitted and which permitted under the grant. Gross floor area is now 125,000 square feet of usable space. The previously reviewed and approved plan approved 122 parking spaces, 122 units. And you can see here, there were 103 one bedroom, 19 two bedrooms, and 24 workforce. The new proposal requests 88 units. That's a difference, that's 34 fewer units. And then the number of one bedrooms and two bedrooms is also reduced proportionately. And the workforce housing remains at 20%. It's now 18. The number of parking spaces remains ratio-wise the same. It's one space per unit, which was essentially what was proposed in the prior application, what was approved in the prior application. Now the numbers were arrived at, reduction in units, allowed for the creation of slightly larger apartments. So they'll be more in keeping with the luxury use that is anticipated for this property. In addition, and I'll show you that in a minute, it allowed for more amenities. This is the plan in white. I'll use my here. This is the footprint of the proposed building, and the footprint of the prior building is outlined in red. If you can see that, I'm just going to go along it here. That was the footprint of the prior proposed building. Here, this area here was originally proposed for and approved for parking. That's been eliminated, and all of this area here is now for mechanical space and to support a pool on the first residential floor, which I'll show you right now. In addition here, this area here, now called for landscape space, was part of the commercial area or retail space. And that's been changed into a landscaped area. This is the first floor of the building. And this shows what the developer, the Recklers, have been able to do by reducing the size of the building and the number of units. They're going to install this terrace area here, and I think you can see that. I'm just going to highlight it. This is a first floor terrace over the ground floor. And it is a pool is going to be installed. This is new. It was not in the original proposal. There'll be an outdoor barbecue picnic area here, seating area over here, and the landscaped court area here. In addition, the clubhouse has been enlarged here, as well as a fitness area here. Both of these spaces open directly onto the terraced area. This is going to provide, for our area, a very unique recreational space for the 88 units for the people, and it'll be at a second floor level because the first floor is one floor above grade. So that is the amenities that are going to be provided. In addition, just to show you, this would be a typical floor, the second through the fourth floor, and you can see the apartments here, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom apartments. And this is looking below here. This looks below to the terrace recreational area below. Here is a rendering of the building. Here, this is the north elevation here, and this and the arrow actually is pointing at the elevator shaft for the building, with a little architectural feature on the top. The west elevation, this will face, that's here. This faces Fifth Avenue. The east elevation faces the railroad parking lot. And the south elevation will face the railroad. And this below here is the mechanical area, and the terrace is up here in this area. So what we're asking for, and we have to ask for this in the CNRs because the old CNRs specified the number of apartments and the quantities in the workforce housing. So we had to come in to ask for less. Otherwise, the application complies with what was previously granted. We're asking for less commercial space, and the original application had 5,000 square feet of commercial, and the new application is 2,400 square feet of commercial. That in a nutshell is the application.
Thank you.
I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Germano. We'll see if there's any public comment, then we'll go to staff report, then we'll come back for questions. I do not see anybody who has indicated they would like to speak. If you joined the meeting later and did not hear this, if you're on the telephone and like to speak, please hit *9 on your phone now and we'll allow you to speak. If you're on the Zoom application itself, please hit the raise your hand at the bottom of the screen and we will allow you to speak now. I don't see anybody popping up on the screen that they would like to speak on this, so I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property was previously granted a change of zone in 2017 for a larger mixed-use building consisting of 122 apartments and 3,500 square feet of commercial space. During site plan review, it was determined that the proposal significantly exceeded the maximum floor area ratio of the downtown development district. The applicant subsequently agreed to reduce the size of the building to what is proposed today, consisting of 88 units, and 2,500 square feet of commercial space and otherwise complying with the downtown development district's floor area ratio. The parking space ratio per unit and the height of the building effectively remain unchanged. Given that the reduced size of the building is anticipated to significantly lessen the impacts over the original approval, the staff has no objection to the application and recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached modified covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. I'm going to now turn it over to board members for questions. Mr. Bruno?
Good evening, Mr. Germano. I have to be honest with you. Now, I wasn't on the board when this was originally approved. And with all due respect to the board members on this board and on the town board that approved it, I do have difficulty with this application. And even the change to it, we hear a lot of applicants who come in here, not the applicants, I'm sorry, excuse me, the public who come in and say, you know, you guys are turning this into Queens. I have to be honest. This may be the first time that I have to agree with them. A lot of us ride the railroad, you go by and you look. And when I look at that south elevation, it looks like Jamaica to me. The building is 5 stories high. What is disturbing to me is I understand all the things that you're doing and why your client wants to put in all these beneficial things. But within the reduction of square footage that you had, you've done nothing to do the 2 items I have the most concern with. Mr. Colgan read, the parking space ratio per unit and the height of the building effectively remain unchanged. Personally, I would like to have seen the parking remain the way it was, because at this point, I'm becoming very concerned, and there are a lot of concerns. For example, if you've read anything lately about downtown Patchogue, they've run into a rental problem. And the problem they've run into is the fact that even though they have the rental units, they kept relaxing the parking to the point where they don't have people renting because they went past that tipping point. I'm of the belief that Bayshore is approaching that same, if it's not there, is already approaching that same thing. You're asking basically to go from 1.75 to 1. I'm saying that if your client had just made the change to the FAR by taking a floor off the building, then you would have been closer to the parking and we would have had a reduced height. So I have to be honest, I'm not pleased with the way this looks. I think that it could have been handled another way, and I'm really not happy with the proposal as I see it now.
Ron, did you want to speak to Mr. Bruno's points?
Yes. Well, just want to point out a couple of things. First, the application was previously approved for the height and the larger number of units, although I think that was number of units was a mistake. And the FAR, we have worked with planning to create a smaller building in terms of of the number of units, and the parking ratio was previously approved as a result of the fact that this is a very unique building and that it's situated adjacent to the railroad. It is right there, and the concept here is a unique concept, that this is a commuter-oriented development. Even the commercial area is adjacent to the parking, the railroad station. The building does comply in all other respects with the downtown PDD. The amenities that are provided are again part of the PDD. The building was designed in order to provide a unique set of amenities, so that and larger apartments to attract users and renters who want to come to downtown Bayshore and live there. The covenants and restrictions that have been proposed and which we've agreed to really restrict the parking to 1 per unit. We actually have 2 extra parking spaces. We have 90 instead of 88. And to change the parking ratio after the approval is would be very difficult. And we are complying with that. And that was not the intent, was to change the parking ratio, but to leave it, but to bring the building down so that, in fact, it wouldn't be the need for as many parking spaces. And by making the building smaller in terms of the number of units, we've also reduced the likelihood that there would be a need for any additional parking. We've gone from 122 to 88 units.
But you could have left the 122 and you could have taken one floor off the building and solved the actual problem. I hear you, Mr. Germano. I just don't feel, I just don't feel that Bayshore is gaining. You said this is a unique concept, but I have to tell you, it's not unique from our eyes. It may be relatively new, but we are hearing it a lot. So I understand that. I just think at some point, there's going to be some issues with this. Again, I have a problem with the height as what it is. We had problems when we went to there was problems with height discussions, just so you know, when we discussed the garage at Good Sam Hospital, which we all know we need those parking spaces, and it was a real question. We approved it at 5 stories, but a 5-story parking garage is actually lower than a 4-story building. So you are considerably higher than that. I'm just saying it's a concern. Obviously, the rest of the board will have their opinion, but I think it's only fair to give you mine.
Right. The other thing I want to mention, in order for this project to go forward in the area that it's in, considerable amount of work has to be done. I showed you a photograph of the existing blighted condition of the property, not just the property that the building is on, but also the property across the street on 5th Avenue, which is going to be the car repair dealership, car repair place, which is going to be demolished. It's already owned by the owner of the property now. So all taken together, the location, the blighted area, the need to, and the improvement that's going to happen to the blighted area, this really is a unique place. Now, I've lived in Bayshore, Brightwaters most of my life, and I've passed by this area most of my life. And I can tell you from my own personal perspective, having a building here, cleaning up this place is going to do a lot for this area of Bayshore. And by reducing the number of units, I think we are, I think we're in good faith, Gary, trying to comply with the zoning, which this complies with. And that this was approved by the town board, by the planning board at the time, for the height and the footprint and the parking relaxation that was requested. What we've done is made it less. And that's really what I can say about this.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. I just want to point out the parking garage was for Southside Hospital that was approved in Bayshore.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said Good Sam.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Madam Moore, I know you would like to speak. Go ahead.
I would. I respectfully disagree with the conclusion that Mr. Bruno makes. I share with him the comments about the concern that this may get out of hand, as perhaps Patchogue has done. However, as Guy Germano just pointed out, and I think this is significant, the location of this building is, I think it's very significant. We all ride the train to the city, and it's sad to look out the window most of the time as to what you see along the railroad. And I'm very familiar, as Mr. Germano is, having been born at Southside Hospital, that this block has come a long ways already to being a major improvement. The actual corner of 5th Avenue there was the old ICE building when I was a kid. It was a shambles. There were broken windows. The thing was a mess. It was not a attractive economic unit. And we got our ice there because that's where the only place you could get your ice. And then immediately to the east is, or was a fuel oil company that was always a bit of an eyesore. And that has been incorporated into this site and has already been majorly improved. And then as Guy mentioned, the parking lot across from the corner of Fifth Avenue there has been a car repair shop, always chock-a-block full, bumper to bumper with cars. And I've always been one that felt somewhat uncomfortable that this is actually the exit for a lot of people that come to Bayshore and see some blighted areas. Are Mr. Bruno's comments with regard to where things are heading, perhaps because of the Queen's comment, I've always shared that concern, but I also share the fact that the town board back in the 80s realized, and I think rightly so, that Bayshore was dying and the DDD was necessary. This is being consistent with the DDD. Would I prefer 3 stories? Yes, but I agree with Mr. Germano's comments that this is what they've proposed. Reckler has a excellent, I think, reputation for quality work. It's going to be an infusion of substantial amounts of money in Bayshore. And I would hate to fool with that at this point when it's such an improvement. As you all remember, immediately to the west was one of the ugliest oil depots probably on the South Shore. And now it's cleaned up and it looks very, very nice. And now we have an opportunity of cleaning up this corner. So as I say, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Bruno's conclusion, although I agree with some of his philosophies that maybe we're getting close to overdoing it, as perhaps is arguable the Patchogue has. I don't know, but this one is well down the road and it's a step downward as far as volume is concerned, as Guy mentioned. So those are my feelings and comments to it, and I'm hopeful that it proceeds.
Thank you, Mr. Matamore. So, Mr. Germano and Mr. Bruno, I was on the planning board as one of my first votes when this came up, and it was a very challenging application at the time. It was a very unique application, as you stated at the time, and it was something that was a close vote, if I recall, in terms of approving it. But looking back on it now, I mean, at the time, and it wasn't your application at the time, it was submitted with a survey that was incorrect. It was submitted with setbacks that were incorrect, that not you, but the applicant was back before this board to make changes to that as well. The FAR calculation that was submitted along with it was incorrect. So some of the decisions certainly that I made were based upon incorrect information that was submitted to me as a member of this board. I know we're back here now. We've come back once before ready to change the setbacks. We're now back here talking about the FAR. And, to Mr. Bruno's point, if you were to come back here and say, we're going to make the change to the FAR, leave the parking in place, but it appears to me that we've actually, did we increase the footprint on the actual solid lot, the larger lot itself?
No, my illustration was that I can put that back up. We've actually decreased the footprint.
So the amenities are going within the actual space that was.
Yes, here's if you look, our footprint is in white. All right. If you look here, you'll see the red line. That is the footprint of the original building. I'm following along now. So we've reduced the footprint of the original building. And the other thing was we put in.
Tell me when you're on the screen now, where did we lose the parking spots from then is my question.
The parking spots were here.
And what's going in place of that?
All the mechanicals, the pool area. The pool is above this, so this is also the pool support and the mechanicals for the building.
Well, the building itself footprint has increased, certainly. We've taken the parking spots out to increase the footprint to the amenities of the project.
Well, yeah, this is all mechanical space. It's under 7.5 feet.
Right.
It's the building support, right? But we haven't increased the footprint. The footprint has been reduced, as you can see here and over here.
No, I mean, if you came back to us and removed in my opinion, remove the 5th floor, as Mr. Bruno said, and possibly, I mean, if you were ever going to remove parking spots, if you were looking at, there's that one lot that's approved that's between residential houses. Like I said, this was a unique application at the time, based upon a survey that was incorrect, setbacks that were incorrect, the FAR calculation that was incorrect. Decisions were made. I'm comfortable. We've come back once before on the setbacks, and we're back again on the FAR. I would tend to agree with Mr. Bruno in terms of the way and direction this is headed in. And again, there may be a way to do this. I don't know that the way that it's before us tonight is the proper way to do this. I think lowering the height of the building, leaving the amount of parking spaces there that were at the 120, whatever the number was, leaving those in place would be the proper way, in my opinion, to do this, to keep it viable and keep it going and make it fit within that footprint down there in downtown Bayshore. I'm familiar with the area. I take the train on a daily basis. I know the parking situation there, and I think the best way to handle this, maybe to keep it viable for me, certainly would be something along the lines of Mr. Bruno spoke about.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Bruno, the building just isn't going to work. The whole project is not going to work if we take the 5th floor off. The whole design, the site, everything just requires that to happen. In order for us to deliver a building with the amenities that are needed to attract young people and old people, empty nesters and young people and commuters to this location. You just can't deliver an old-fashioned garden apartment and expect that it's going to be occupied.
I hear everything you're saying.
In a location like this. So, I mean, and a big part of this also is the cleaning up of the blight. I mean, Mr. Mattermore mentioned the old oil tanks across the street that were there. That actually wasn't just oil. That was the old coal gasification plant that Loco ran for many, many years. And that's created a lot of pollution. And I think maybe if you're familiar with Bayshore, you're familiar with the pollution plume that extends all the way from that property, actually under this property, and down into the Bayshore area south and into some of the areas south of Montauk.
I agree. It's certainly cleaning up an area. I'm familiar with the area. I think that's one of the reasons I certainly supported it early on. I just, don't know that I would have supported. I certainly would not have supported it if the application came before us with all of the issues that were incorrect at that time. The survey, again, I'll mention, the setbacks, again, the FAR, I'll mention, all were incorrect. And also those amenities that the applicant is now saying are needed, I don't believe were proposed at that time when this was put before us. So the application is again changing somewhat along those lines. I think, Mr. Frugier, your mic is not muted. Does that mean you can speak?
Yep, I'm ready. I'm as we're talking, I'm looking at the aerial photograph and all the blight that's on the proposed lot, as well as the areas across the street. And also, this is a property that runs adjacent to the Long Island Railroad tracks. Should we, push to try to reduce the number of units or the height or get rid of the amenities, what we're doing is opening ourselves up to having a project that's doomed to fail. It just would not work. To get people to move into an apartment community, adjacent to a railroad tracks, you need Class A amenities to go along with that. And I think that's what the applicant is proposing here. And I actually see what's being proposed as an improvement over what was originally approved.
Thank you, Mr. Frugier. Mr. Brown, did you have a comment?
I did. I originally supported the application in 17. And one of the things that I remember is that as Mr. Germano said, it was a unique project, is it had direct railroad access. Is that still in this project?
Yes, Mr. Brown, well, it has direct access. It's right there, adjacent to the railroad station, and the railroad platform runs right up to the side of the building. So there'll be direct access out the front door and down into the, and up onto the platform. So the access is right there from the outside of the building, from the front door.
To Mr. Brown's point on that, I was on the board as well at the time when we supported it. The application as presented to us was not out the front door, it was a direct access off the platform to the back. Has that been granted by the MTA?
I'm not sure. It may have been. The applicant is not proposing that connection at this time. It really wasn't felt that that was needed in order to, make the building and the residents accessible to the railroad station, because it's right, it's adjacent to it. And you can't get any closer.
I certainly understand that. I think one of the things, at least from Mr. Brown mentioned, that when he mentioned, I do recall, was one of the unique aspects of it, again, for us, was that it was and it was on the record.
That's not part of this plan. I know if I just, Mr. Brown, Mr. Farr, Jeremy, the way this application has, the applicant is proposing to build really a unique Class A apartment complex building. Have any of you seen, he's currently finishing the project in Amityville. If you go inside the buildings and see the amenities that he's produced there, and the units sizes and the finishes in the units, you can't help but be impressed. It's the same type of building. It'll be a different look to the building, but the interior finishes and the amenities that are provided will equal or exceed what's in Amityville. And that is the concept that the Recklers have for their rental housing. The other thing you should understand is this is not build and flip. This is build and hold. The Recklers own 6.5 million square feet of industrial properties. They're building residential properties now to support their the commercial properties. And it's a buy and hold. They've held on to these properties for many years. They still own properties that the father and grandfather built years ago. So this is a group of people and company and individuals who make an investment into a community and then they stick with it. And they do a fantastic job. And if you go around and look at their buildings, you'll see what they do and how they maintain them.
Mr. Mono, I take no issue with the Recklers. I think they do great work. I've seen some of their other buildings. It's whether or not for me it fits in that location, in that space. Mr. Musumeci, I noticed your mic is not muted. Do you have questions or comments?
I'm trying to understand, Mr. Germano, the connection between the height and why this project works direct connected to the height. Is Amityville the same height? I don't know the plans of Amityville.
No, Amityville is a very different building. There's more room on the property. They're spread out.
Okay.
It's different than these structures. This structure was originally designed and approved pursuant to the Bayshore PDD. Amityville was pursuant to other regulations in the town of Babylon. But this is approved under the PDD. I think, reiterate, it complies with the PDD. Our change to the application brings us within the FAR requirement. We're in with the height requirement. We're in compliance with the change of zone that was granted. Our only request here is to reduce the number of apartments.
I didn't mean
to CNRs that were in the CNRs. If the CNRs didn't mention the number of apartments, we wouldn't be back here.
Okay, I didn't mean to allude that you weren't in compliance. I was just trying to understand the statement that you made, that you said it doesn't work unless it's.
No, the owner has clearly stated that financially, practically, what the request to remove a floor doesn't work. I mean, that was one of the first things that was looked at. It doesn't happen. It can't support the building. It can't support the amenities. And it's not, it won't work. You know, it's been designed, everything has been designed pursuant to meeting the requirements of the PDD and the original grant. And that's where we are. We don't believe we need any additional parking. We're right adjacent to the railroad station. And you know, if you look at what's happening in today with young people, they're driving less. They're using mass transportation more. That's one of the beauties of this site. It will attract young people and older people who want to go to the city. They can jump on the train. They'll go to work. They'll commute back and forth. It doesn't really get any easier than that. And our country and our young people are moving away from everybody driving to work in their own car. And certainly, well, the proximity to downtown is a big attraction. So, I mean, and let's face it, given the economic conditions that we're in right now with the pandemic and what's happening to our economy, to have an application like this with an applicant who has the wherewithal and the intention to build and move forward because he has a long view of the world, long view of the future, is significant. There'll be a lot of projects I think that probably won't go forward now, given what's happening to the economy, given the fact that there's so many unknowns. This is an opportunity to continue the improvements to downtown Bayshore and to eliminate really terribly blighted area and do a lot of good for Bayshore. That's what I think. I've lived there a very long time, and I still live in Bayshore. So that is our application. I just have to say that if, you know, we cannot take a floor off and deliver the product. It's not going to work financially or any other way.
Mr. Germano or Mr. Colgan, either one of you, to Mr. Musumeci's point, at the time this application was approved in terms of it working and not working, are we still dealing with the original developer? I don't remember being the Recklers.
No, the original developer, well, the original, yes, the proposer was Greg Collins, and he has, his office is on the property. I don't know that he ever had an intention to actually develop the property. I think the planning department knew that. So that was a very different application. This is an application by somebody who knows how to build, what to build, knows who will buy and what they'll buy.
Thank you. Mr. Moriarty, did you have questions? I noticed your mic is unmuted.
Yeah, it's not questions, just comments at this point, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Look, I respect tremendously the arguments or suggestions that Gary raised, problems with the project and the prior application. But at the end of the day, I have to weigh in and support Mr. Matamore and Mr. Ferriggiari and the positions they've articulated. The area is significantly blighted. This is an opportunity for us to clean up an area north of the train tracks in Bayshore. I think most of the development, as we all know, has happened south of the railroad tracks and closer to Main Street. Here's a significant, I think, upgrade to that particular area that is, you know, blighted is an understatement. It's an eyesore. It's been that way as Mr. Matamore articulated since he was a child. I think particularly given the fact that we're facing some of these economic issues that Mr. Germano alluded to with the pandemic, it's an opportunity to get a significant investment in an area north of the train tracks in Bayshore. It's not perfect, but you know, I think it works, and I think it's a very attractive project, one that I think the town of Bayshore would be happy to have, and I think based upon all those issues, I'm still supportive of the project with all its imperfections.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty. I would just add to this, I mean, another factor with Mr. Brown's point is the direct connection to the platform. Now we're going to have people walking through the parking lot, through to get to the platform itself. Is that the plan of what you're saying out the front door?
No, they wouldn't walk through the parking lot. I can put up the screen again. They would come out, and we have a plaza here. Can you see I'm going to put my little pen here. There's a plaza here, and they'll walk through the plaza right up. And here's the railroad is right here. We could, of course, put a gate here or something if we wanted to, but they would walk right here, and here's the platform.
So they're walking out into the municipal lot, or they're still staying on the property line?
Well, from here is the municipal lot. I believe we're going to have an easement we have an easement with the town that's already worked out, so we're going to maintain parking here in connection with this with the retail space, which is located here. So we're going to maintain in fact, this plaza area is actually part of a town property that we're going to beautify, put in planters, as you can see them here, and so this will be the logical walking area would be along this walkway here and into the platform right there.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I would just say, I mean, my opinion on it is, again, had the original application been before us with a correct survey, with a correct setbacks, with the correct FAR, in addition to it, had the application been before us in today's day and age and where we're at with COVID-19 and coronavirus, where I think there's going to be less of a reliance upon mass transportation and more of a reliance upon people driving cars or getting around in their own personal vehicles, I certainly would not have supported it then. To allow applicants to come before the board and provide us, it wasn't your application at the time, whether it be misleading or just a lot of errors on an application to get something approved, then to come back before us 2 additional times to start modifying everything from setbacks to FARs to the survey and everything else to say, well, we're back here before you now, and you've already approved it once, therefore you should let us make this modification to keep within the same exact structure that it was, or the same exact size, the same exact height, the same exact everything else is not on your part, but certainly on the original applicant's part, a little disingenuous and is not the way that people should be proceeding before this board, and is not certainly a precedent that I'd like to set, is to allow people to come before this board providing a series of erroneous information to members of this board when they make a decision, and then to come back before us multiple times and still expect everything to be the same. So certainly where I stand is that, and I am a resident of Bay Shore, I live in Bay Shore, and I take that Bay Shore train every day. And I agree with everyone's point on the fact that that is a blighted area and things need to change in that area and get better. I just don't, I would not approve anything anywhere in any community to get rid of blight if it doesn't fit in, it doesn't work, and it's not appropriate for that area. I would ask applicants that come before this board to present something that is appropriate for that area to get rid of the blight, not just because somebody's willing to invest money to get rid of blight, that they can do whatever they deem appropriate, regardless of what it looks like, what it does to the community, and how it fits into the community. So I certainly am not in support of it tonight. Are there further questions from the board? With Mr. Germano, you're welcome to add anything further you'd like to
I
add.
just want to say that, I mean, I had, and the rec had nothing to do with the prior application, obviously. When we found out what the problems were, in fact, we were raising them even before it was raised with the town, that you know, we can't do anything about what they did before. All we can do is come in with, and you know, everything that we've submitted is accurate. Our surveys are accurate, plans are accurate. So we've come in and trying to, you know, do what the board originally intended and what you originally saw as part of the project. We're not asking to reduce the FAR. We're coming in with a reduced FAR. all we're asking for, and that's not going to make this point, all we're asking for is to reduce in the CNRs that exist, the number of units that were permitted, the maximum number of units permitted in the original FAR, the original CNRs were 122. We're here for the board to ask for the number to be reduced to 88. We're also asking that the amount of space devoted to the commercial area be reduced to 2,400 square feet, 2,500 square feet. And that's our application. Other than that, we're complying with everything that was before the board, that the board thought it was granting properly. And it's not the board's fault what happened. I mean, we clearly see that. So really all we're asking for is the CNRs be amended so we can take out 122 units and replace it with 88 units, and take out some of the commercial space and replace it with less commercial space. That's it, nothing else. So I can't see really how our application is in any way, it's not doing an injustice to this board or to the town board when we go before the town board, assuming we were to get a grant here. So, and that's all we're doing. And in exchange for that, we're going to improve a very blighted area. We're going to clean up the environmental issues. There are environmental issues on this site because it was used for fuel oil station. It's used to park. Other areas are used for car repair. There was a cleaning after the after the ice company left, a laundry moved in. And so you have the pollution of whatever they did. So all that's being cleaned up as part of this. It's really a major effort to clean this site up. And in order to do that, it really requires a major investment. And to have a company come in here and say, we're willing to make that investment, we're willing to provide a really superior product that's going to have a longevity, it's on the railroad. You know, I don't see that it really gets as far as what we're proposing and how this is going to affect the community in positive ways. I think it's a good bargain. That's what I think. And all of these things are, you know, all the changes of zones and things that you do are, you know, communities looking to get something from it. Developer is going to build something and hold on to it. I think it's a really important point. And he's going to do it in spite of the fact that our economy now looks like it's going downhill fast. So I think for Bayshore, for the community to maintain Bayshore in the way it's been going, hopefully it will continue to go up and continue to be improved. But we will have to be concerned about the retail, bringing additional people to the community to support the retail at this time is going to be even more important.
Thank you, Mr. Germano. Just to be clear, obviously, none of this was, you were not the original attorney on this. So when I was speaking of that, and the Recklers were not the original developers on that. So nothing directed at you as the attorney of record this evening, and nothing directed at the Recklers. So just want to be clear on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, I just had a question for Sean. Sean, just changing the CNRs and the square footage on a commercial, that go before the town board after us, where we're just making a recommendation to the town board?
Yes, it'd ultimately be up to the town board.
Thank you. Anything, Mr. Matamore? Unmute your mic.
You would think I would remember. I apologize. One thing that has been sticking in my throat for a while, and it has come up not on this application, but the one involving Toro, is that, and that there's a similar issue over there, as you know, and I think this application may indeed start to set a precedent of sorts. And I'm scratching my head and thinking back to the 80s, and the DDD talked about 7 stories. Now, I didn't like the sound of 7 stories. I don't even like the sound of 5 stories very much, but I like the sound of anything with this kind of quality at the location that it is. And I think Guy has handled the argument very well that, hey, it's a different situation now than it was. Yes, our board should not be abused, or the town shouldn't be abused. I don't think that happened intentionally, but I think it happened through lack of sophistication, perhaps, with the first applicant. But isn't it consistent with the DDD? Was the town board out of their minds when they said 7 stories? And we're not at 7 stories, we're at 5 stories on the railroad tracks. I believe that that the town of Islip is being consistent in considering this application, and it's being consistent, the town board will be consistent in granting 5 at this location. If it belongs any place, it belongs here. That was just a thought that's been haunting me for a while. We haven't gotten to the Toro situation. That may be a different situation, different location and so forth. This is a blighted area. Toro, frankly, is not a blighted area, but that's a different situation. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Mr. Matamore. And certainly I've supported 5-story projects. This one is a little unique in the fact that it's 1 parking spot per unit, which is a significant relaxation.
Yes.
Is there anything further from the board? And precedent setting, as you said. Nothing further from the board, anything further from the applicant?
No, there's nothing further. I just wanted to address that one comment about parking relaxation was granted as part of the original application. And I think everyone was fully aware of that. And that's we're not asking for that to be changed. We're not doing anything with that parking relaxation. Again, our application is merely to reduce the number of units and reduce the commercial area. And I thank the board very much for their time.
Thank you, Mr. Germano. That being said, is there a motion? I don't know who to call on, so I'll wait for a hand to go up. Mr. Matamore. Unmute again.
I've unmuted without the prompting of the chairman. I would make a motion to close this hearing and grant the application as submitted by the applicant. And that would be the motion that I'd make.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Matamore to close the public hearing and grant the application. Looks like there's a second by Mr. Moriarty. Is that you raising your hand? Turn your mute. You're muted again.
Here we go. Sorry about that. Apologies. Yes, there's a second from Mr. Matamore's motion.
Thank you. Second, motion is seconded by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Frugieri, aye. Mr. Brown, aye.
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 Moriarty, aye. Mr. Bruno? Okay, those are all the ayes. Opposed? 1 opposed, myself. Any abstention? Mr. Bruno, you're muted. I don't know how you're voting.
Oh, myself?
Yeah.
I'm objecting, obviously.
You're
I'm opposed, yes.
So it passes 5 in favor, 2 opposed. The project passes.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Mr. Germano.
Thank you, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7 on the agenda, I'm sorry, Town Board Application Public 812 Wheeler Road LLC, CZ 2020-012, north side of Wheeler Road, State Route 111, number 812, approximately 130 feet west of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454, Hop 812 Wheeler Road. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 5212 in order to permit a medical office use. Is the applicant here?
Good evening, Billy Germano, attorney with Germano and Cahill, 4250 Veterans Highway, Holbrook, New York, for the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Germano. Go ahead when you're ready.
Great. The applicant seeks a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 5212 on the subject property to expand the permitted uses of the property to include a 3,500 square foot medical office. Following a 2015 change of zone from residential AA to business 1, CNRs were signed limiting the use of the property to specialty retail center, which is defined as a small shopping strip center containing a variety of retail shops, typically small restaurants or services such as real estate. The owner has a prospective tenant seeking to open a city MD, which is an urgent care type facility. This tenant space has been empty since the building was constructed approximately a year and a half ago. There are currently 2 operating tenants in the new building. One is a takeout restaurant, the Pita Pit, and one is a specialty fitness tenant. The only functioning tenant at this time due to the pandemic is the takeout restaurant. City MD is a neighborhood medical office and a facility that would certainly be an asset to the community in light of the current crisis. The nearest urgent care facility is in Comac, over 7 miles away. The site is on approximately 1.64 acres, and the retail building is approximately 16,500 square feet. The proposed change would affect about 1/5 of the building space. Now, the location of the proposed medical use would be on the eastern corner of the building. I will just quickly share my screen. Is it visible to the board?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I've highlighted in red where the facility would be in accordance with the building on the easternmost corner. And I also have a couple of other things I want to point out. Now this building's been up for a year and a half now. You can see, as indicated by the pink arrows, it's a right in, right out onto Wheeler Road. And there are 2 green sets of arrows in and out. There is cross access, that's connections that currently exist as depicted here with the neighboring commercial site. The parties, the applicant and the owner of the adjacent site, have entered into a cross-access easement agreement. And so all customers from both commercial sites could have access to the surrounding network of roads. So I just want to illustrate to the board the surrounding roadway network that is being impacted. On this plan, you can see, as indicated by red arrows in and out on Town Line Road, all customers have access from the subject premises and the neighboring commercial facility and office building in and out of Town Line Road, in and out on Wheeler Road, and in and out on Veterans Memorial Highway, so that the traffic can be dispersed in all directions. A traffic impact assessment was submitted to the planning board in connection with this application, to the planning department, and the report indicated that the proposed project will not significantly impact traffic flow, parking, and safety on the surrounding roadways, and that the level of traffic associated with a 3,500 square foot medical office is similar to the traffic associated with the 3,500 square foot retail space that was initially permitted. So unless that's all I have, if the board has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Toronto. I'm just going to see if there's anybody for public. I'll go to a staff report and then we'll come back for questions. I do not show anybody who wishes to be heard on this application. Anybody joined the meeting late who wishes to be heard, if you're on a telephone, please hit *9 on your phone now and we'll welcome you in to speak on this application. If you're on the Zoom application, at the bottom of the screen, you can raise your hand and we will allow you to speak at this time. Seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application proposes a modification of covenants and restrictions that limited the use of the property to a specialty retail center, which is defined as follows. Specialty retail centers are generally small strip shopping centers that contain a variety of retail shops and specialize in quality apparel, hard goods, and services such as real estate offices, dance studios, florists, and small restaurants. The applicant is requesting to allow medical use, specifically an urgent care use, which is similar to a clinic. The rationale back for the original change of zone for limiting the use to a specialty retail center was based on the traffic impacts associated with a standard retail center. Existing conditions in the immediate area did indicate a poor level of service during peak times. The town's traffic consultant has evaluated the traffic impact study from changing the 3,500 square foot clinic and agreed with the finding that the change in traffic volumes would be minimal and would not have a detrimental impact on operating conditions. The medical use could complement the center and create synergy among the various uses that are there. Based on the traffic consultant's report, the staff has no objection and recommends the attached covenants and restrictions should the board grant the application.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Are there any questions from the board? I'm not seeing any. Would the applicant like any further?
Nothing further.
Is there a motion? Mr. Musumeci. Moriarty?
Yes, I would move to close the hearing and to grant subject to the CNRs that are attached.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the CNR. Is there a second?
I'll second the application.
Second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, Town Board application public hearing, Bolson Restaurant, PZ 2020-013, southeast corner of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A, number 166, and Suffolk Lane, East Islip, 166 West Montauk Highway. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with PC 3733 in order to request a variance for a second ground sign. Is the applicant here?
Yes, I am. Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Hi, and thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to still work during these times. Very much appreciated being calendared tonight. My name is Janice Whalen. My office is at 424 New York Avenue in Huntington. I'm appearing in support of 166 West Main Street, East Islip LLC, seeking a modification of signage provisions associated with TC 3733 in order to request a variance from the zoning board to permit a second ground sign. Appearing with me this evening is an intern by the name of Amelia Sutter. She's studying urban planning at New York Institute of Technology, and she's joined me on this call. I want to be very clear that I'm not asking the board to permit the variances. I'm only asking for your recommendation so that I can go to the town board and ask them to modify this condition and then in turn go to the zoning board. So this is a three-step process. I don't want you to think that by this meeting, you're approving the ultimate relief that we're requesting. Previously, I filed affidavits of filing and posting, and I have the green receipts. I've also reviewed the proposed deed restrictions that Mr. Colgan had provided for me. I've gone over them with Mr. Bolson, and he is in full agreement and will execute them, assuming we get through this board and then the town board. So just so you know that what's been submitted to us, we're fully on board with it. And just very quickly, the entire site's about 30,000 square feet. It's zoned GST. According to the certificate of occupancy, the site's been operated as a restaurant for the past 47 years. We have two signs on the property right now, a two-sided facade on Montauk Highway. When the steakhouse was there in the 70s and the beech tree was there in the 80s, the sign always existed in that location. When the restaurant was changed to H2O about 2016, the facade was changed then. I believe previously the zoning board had permitted 18 square feet for the sign area. We have two sides of that sign covered with an H2O logo. So the area that we're requesting is 18 times 2 or 36 square feet. Again, that will be a request we made to the zoning board should we get that far. The sign is about 18 feet in height. It's about the same height as the sign that previously existed there. The cabinet's about 16 inches in depth. I have a letter from an engineering firm I had sent it to Mr. Colgan earlier today. Island Structural Engineering had reviewed both signs and certified that both of these signs can withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds. And I've also looked at the minutes from the town board hearing where the original CNRs were proposed. And I've also sent a scan of those minutes to Mr. Colgan. I don't know if the board's had a chance to review them. I sent them very late in the day. Nowhere in this meeting, I believe it was 1989, was anything about signage mentioned. I believe that an old template was used to generate a CNR, and that CNR stated that the applicant would make no further applications to the zoning board. And it's that provision that we're seeking to ask relief from. Again, we've got two signs. One is the pylon sign on Montauk Highway. The second is a 13-square-foot sign at the intersection of Montauk and Suffolk Lane. It's kind of a catty-corner sign. It's just about 13 square feet. And it's that sign that we really want to keep. It was never legalized, but Mr. Bolson assured me that when it was the Beech Tree Cafe, there was in fact a wood carved sign on that location. Basically, that's the sum and substance of my presentation. These signs are, the ground sign at the corner is only illuminated by landscape lights, and the pylon sign on Montauk Highway is internally lit, but I understand that no light spills out into the street. There's never been any complaints. The relief we're going to be seeking from the zoning board just solely relates to the area and the number of signs.
Thank you, Ms. Whalen.
Thank you.
This is another public hearing. I do not see anyone who's elected to speak on this. If you just joined the meeting or joined late, if you're on the phone and like to speak, please hit *9 on your phone now. Will allow you to speak. If you're using the Zoom app, you can hit the raise your hand at the bottom and we will allow you to speak. Not seeing anyone who's indicating that they would like to speak, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application proposes to modify a covenant that prohibits the property owner from requesting variances for exterior signage. The town had a longstanding general policy of prohibiting sign variances in conjunction with change of zones prior to about 2010. This was changed as it came to be understood that relief to zoning regulations is sometimes needed and is reviewed on a case-by-case basis by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Current policy for sign covenants now precludes sign variances without first obtaining the planning department's approval, which shall not be unreasonably withheld. Current planning department sign policy is to prohibit sign variance applications that pose adverse safety concerns such as motorist visibility and distractions, or nuisances such as bright signs shining towards residences. Staff does not oppose the applicant's rights to seek sign variances from the independent body charged with that responsibility when health, safety, and welfare are not compromised. The signs as they exist today need height, area, and quantity variances. Should the modification to these covenants be granted, the Zoning Board of Appeals will have to consider whether there is a genuine hardship with regards to signage and the area limitations with regards to the general service T district. Planning staff will adjust the merits of those variances before the Zoning Board at that time. Should the Planning Board grant the modification, the staff recommends the attached covenants and restrictions, which is the standard covenant for signs that this board generally utilizes for these types of applications.
Thank you, Colgan. So just to be clear on this, what we're voting on tonight is not on the merits of the sign itself. We're just voting to more or less make a covenant consistent with other covenants.
That's correct. It's simply to authorize the applicant to make that application to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Well, actually, can I speak for a second? I thought that this board is just allowing us to go to the town board, which will ultimately modify the covenant. And then should that happen, then we get to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it's a 3-step process.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. That was in stereo because we're both in the same room. Yeah, just my point was that we're not voting on the merits of it here. We're just making the covenants consistent so you can actually go ahead and do that.
Correct.
Are there any questions from members of the board? Is there anything further, Ms. Whalen?
No, thank you very much for allowing me to make my application.
Thank you. Ms. Musumeci, is there a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion to grant the application subject to the conditions.
Thank you. There is a motion by Mr. Musumeci to grant the application. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
By Mr. Brown, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very, very much and stay well, everyone.
Thank you.
You too.
Abstentions?
You too.
Carries.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Application approved. Thank you. Item 9 on the agenda, major subdivision modification, DCNR, Settlers Road subdivision, Hopog, formerly Christer Estates, MS 2007-005, northerly terminus of Settlers Road, 120 feet north of Old Post Road, Hopog. Request to modify the final resolution to eliminate the requirement of the cul-de-sac island and update the bond figures. Is the applicant here for this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, appearing on behalf of the applicant Eugene L. Di Nicola, 200 Railroad Avenue, Sayville. Mr. Chairman, this matter involves the modification of a final resolution of a 10-lot major subdivision, which was approved December 1, 2016. And it had reapprovals subsequent to that. The resolution required a planted island in the cul-de-sac. The planted island in the cul-de-sac is being eliminated, which requires a modification of the final resolution and amended bond figures. At this time, I will defer to Mr. Gonzalez for his report to the board, because I do believe that this application was even generated by the engineering department.
Thank you, Mr. Di Nicola. Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was recently given final reapproval on the March 4th, 2020 Planning Board. DPW has directed our department to have applicants not construct these cul-de-sac islands for new roads as they become maintenance issues after dedication. Although staff feels the islands are an aesthetic benefit to new subdivisions, DPW as well as the applicant have stated they would rather not have them installed. As the road will eventually be dedicated to the town, it must be removed from the requirements. In anticipation that the final resolution would eventually have to be modified to meet this request, staff discussed this with the applicant and felt it best to revise it now and adjust the bonds and fees accordingly in order to have all aspects solidified before moving forward. So the bond figures that are in your packets now are the updated ones. They didn't really differ that much. Because there were some things that needed to be rectified based on the old ones. So they're only slightly lower, but it does include the elimination of the cul-de-sac island. So moving forward, that will not be an issue. So based on that, staff recommends the board grant the application to the updated conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions from the board? Not seeing anything further, Mr. Di Nicola. Oh, Mr. Matamore, is that a question?
No. I'd make a motion. Sorry.
I will take that as a motion. What's the motion, Mr. Matamore?
The motion is to close the hearing and grant the application.
Motion by Mr. Matamore to grant the application. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Bruno, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Nicole. Don't go too far on me. Next application, Town Board Application Recommendation Item 3 River Boys LLC, CZ 2019-017, west side of Lakeland Avenue, County Route 93, number 140, approximately 130 feet south of Tariff Street, Sayville, 140 Lakeland Avenue. Applicant requests a change of zone from Residence B to General Service T in order to utilize an existing single-family dwelling for an office use. Site plan modifications may be requested as part of this application. Mr. Di Nicola?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Again, members of the board, appearing on behalf of the applicant Eugene L. Di Nicola, 200 Railroad Avenue, Sayville, New York. This matter is on this evening for a recommendation by the planning board for a change of zone for the subject premises from Residence B District to General Service T District to utilize the existing structure for office use from a single-family dwelling. A public information hearing was held on December 12, 2019, at which time a presentation was made to the board in support of the change of zone application. Subsequent to the public information hearing, deed covenants and restrictions were negotiated with Mr. Cogan, and have been accepted and agreed to by the applicant. I spoke with the principal of the applicant today, and she will be signing the covenants and restrictions, and will either email or deliver them to my office, at which time I will transmit them to Mr. Colgan at the planning department. I met with the fire marshal, Mr. Doucette, who had no issue with the one-way driveway from the Lakeland Avenue curb cut to the rear of the premises, which is on the west, and the egress from the premises to Greeley Avenue. The structure on the premises is being occupied as a law office, and the readaptive use of the subject premises from a single-family dwelling to an office use is in keeping with the legislative intent of the zoning ordinance in the General T Service District. The site will retain its present visual quality of architecture and streetscape. At this time, I will defer to the report of the planning staff and respectfully request that the board recommend approval of the change of zone to the town board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
Thank you, Mr. DiNicola. Mr. Colgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was previously heard on December 12th of last year. Primary concerns raised at that time were the encroachment of the driveway into the buffer and access from Greeley Avenue. The staff referred the proposed layout to traffic safety. That division indicated that the proposed layout is preferred to limit the trips out onto Lakeland Avenue, as that roadway can experience relatively high traffic volumes, and it would be safer to have traffic leave out onto Greeley. While any encroachments into a buffer is not ideal, it should be noted that the encroachment is relatively minor, that 3 rows of trees can still be accommodated in that 20-foot portion of the buffer, and the proposed use is not anticipated to generate a lot of traffic, noise, or other adverse impacts that a large buffer would be more necessary to address. Weighed with the fact that the property is adjacent to a gas station on a major town thoroughfare, and is not typically considered an ideal location for single-family residence. So based on that, the staff has no objection to the application, subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Are there any questions from the board? Not seeing any. Anything further, Mr. DiNicola?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, I would actually move to grant the application subject to conditions.
Motion by Mr. Moriarty. Yeah, Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to conditions. Is there a second? Mr. Bruno laughing at me.
I'll second.
Yes, I would second that motion.
Mr. Frugieri beat you to it. There's a second by Mr. Frugieri. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Mr. DiNicola, you're 2 for 0 tonight. You're in good shape.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much, and have a good evening and stay well. I tried to be brief because it's been a long evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item 11 on the agenda, site plan modification decision item, Nether Bay LLC Sing SP 2019-023, 36 South Clinton Avenue, Bay Shore. Applicant requests a site plan modification to allow the use of the pre-existing basement pursuant to TC 5302. Is the applicant here?
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to remind you, I'm recusing myself on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty. And I should go back on the record on 2 other ones earlier, but I'll do that after this. Thank you.
Great.
Yes, good evening. This is Charles Ferraro, principal of Nether Bay, residing at 159 West Bayberry Road in Islip, New York. I guess we're requesting a decision to utilize the square feet of the existing basement on our assisted living. When we first presented to the planning department, we did not realize that the basement was considered included in the FAR of the building. And at this point, the basement is necessary for our site to be successful. The basement is going to include a kitchen, a commercial kitchen, and an employee lounge, and a bath, and ladies and gentlemen's bathroom for the employees. So I don't know, I think if this was presented to you guys before, if you have any questions for me.
What I'm going to do is, my screen's, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan for a report, then we'll come back for some questions.
Okay.
Mr. Colgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application proposes to allow for the use of the basement as part of the approved assisted living facility. The assisted living facility was approved in 2019. At that time, the applicant neglected to include the basement on the submitted conceptual site plan. The applicant proposes to utilize this for the kitchen and storage space. Primary determinant of the intensity of an assisted living is the number of beds or patients. Given that this proposal does not include an increase in patients and the basement is pre-existing, staff does not foresee any adverse impacts with allowing the use of the basement and including it in the overall gross floor area of the building. The staff recommends the board grant the modification subject to the site plan limiting the basement to the uses mentioned by the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Do we have any questions from the board? Not seeing any questions, I think we'll go forward, even though I always give my speech about submitting things to the board and then coming back for subsequent changes. In this case, I don't think anything significantly has changed and the use hasn't changed, and it doesn't really have any significant impact on the application. So I have no concerns on it. Not seeing any of the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Ferraro?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear on what we're doing in the basement. If I could share my screen here a second. Let's see. Do you guys see it now?
No.
No?
We do not.
Let's see, share. Okay, hold on.
There we go.
You got it?
Yeah, you can see your desktop.
It's fishing.
Okay, yeah, well, sorry, that was my screensaver, but here we go. So this is what we want to utilize for the finished product. And the basement that's utilized, the existing basement right now is configured a little differently than what we would like to do. Right now, this is the existing basement, and this is the front of the building. So the basement kind of is more in the front right now, and this is the existing basement that is actually usable space, which consists of an 8-foot ceiling. Everything else there's existing basement there now that's non-usable, that's under the 8-foot. So we're trying to utilize the similar area to what's existing, but we would like to shift it only because we have an elevator or a delivery area in the back, and it's more useful for the kitchen to be in the back area versus where the existing space is in the front. So I just wanted to be clear, we're not adding additional square footage. We're just shifting the space around a little differently from where it exists right now to the new space.
Okay, so you're okay with the fact that it's not going to be used for office space or anything like that? It's really what you just outlined?
Correct.
And okay, you're okay, there'll be a letter, Mr. Colgan, how would that be reflected?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear, because the existing, you never know with terminology. Existing means use that particular space, whereas, we want to just shift it over. It's the same square footage. It's just located in a different spot in the basement.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
And Mr. Colgan, I don't know if you said that on the record. Did you? The answer to the question.
Oh, yes, we'll craft an approval letter that limits the site plan approval to the uses the applicant mentioned on the record.
Thank you. Mr. Farrar, anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you. And I hope that's your Zoom screensaver behind you and you're not in some other time zone where you're.
Yes, it is my Zoom screensaver. I didn't realize that was up there. I wasn't planning it up. I have a couple a week, and that was the one with the family. So sorry about that.
Fishing out by the beach. I don't know, just rub it in.
No, I'm not that lucky.
Okay. That being said, is there a motion? Mr. Matamore?
Yes, I move to close the hearing and grant the application subject to the discussions that we've had in the document crafted by Sean pursuant to these discussions.
Motion by Mr. Matamore to approve, subject to everything else he just said in that motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
A second by Mr. Musumeci. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board. Have a good night.
Good night. I just want to, as housekeeping, clarify for the record that on items number 1 and number 6, that Mr. Matamore was recused on those two for voting purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty, for reminding me of that when you recused yourself on that item. Item 12 on the agenda, planning board application, decision item, Park Street Architects, PB 2019-015, northwest corner of Brightside Avenue and Wilson Boulevard, Central Islip, 69 Brightside Avenue. Applicant requests 2 planning board special permits for the overnight parking of registered vehicles and outside parking of unpacked box trailers in the Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68-340.1C and 68-340.1P. Site plan modifications may be requested as part of this application. Good evening. Is the applicant ready? The applicant with us?
The applicant has been brought into the meeting. The applicant, James and Mike, your microphones are muted. Mike Taylor, we heard audio a moment ago. If you're ready to speak, the floor is yours.
Start mute.
Ms. Taylor, you were not on mute. You now put yourself on mute. Oh, there you go.
Oop, there I am. I'm sorry. I think Jim, my engineer, is presenting, actually. He should be on here.
He is on here. James, I see you're listed here. Are you ready to speak? He's certainly listed here. Is it James Nicolazzi?
That's him.
He's listed here. He's in the room as a presenter. I don't know if it shows no video on his end, but the audio is not muted.
All right. He called me a few minutes ago. He was on, so I'm not sure where he is now.
He's still here. He's in the room as a panelist. He's just raised his hand. His microphone is not muted. James, we can see your hand raised. Your microphone should be open.
Mr. Taylor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to item 13 on the agenda. If you want to call your architect or speak with him and see if we can get a.
Okay.
We'll call you back after the next item. How's that?
Super. Okay, thank you.
Item 13 on the agenda, Town Board application, recommendation item S4M LLC, CZ 2018-028, southwest corner of Biltmore Avenue and Idle Hour Boulevard, 96 Biltmore Avenue, Oakdale. Applicant requests a change of zone from residence AA to general service T in order to legalize a non-degree granting school. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application. Mr. Garbarino, are you with us?
He was in the room before.
Do we have the applicant on this one?
The applicant sent us a chat saying they're in the queue waiting to be heard, but I cannot, neither I nor Rennie can locate Mr. Garbarino.
Okay, he was in earlier. I'm not sure if he got disconnected. Mr. Garbarino, if you're listening somewhere, maybe you should disconnect and reconnect, and we'll recall the item again after we finish the other items. So I'm going to move on to item number 14 on the agenda, Town Board application recommendation item, North Point Development LLC, CZ 2020-004, southwest corner of Sunrise Highway Service Road, State Route 27A, and Oakdale Bohemia Road, Oakdale, 0 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a change of zone from residence AA district to general service D district in order to construct the mini storage warehouse. Do we have the applicant? Mr. Lord, are you the applicant on?
We do.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Patrick Lord. Is Mr. David Leno on?
Mr. David Leno is coming into the room as a panelist in a moment.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Leno, you should be in the room and your microphone is unmuted.
Yes. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Members of the board, my name is David Leno from the law firm of Rifkin Radler. I'm here tonight on behalf of Northport Development LLC with regard to their proposed development of the property located at the southwest corner of Sunrise Highway, Service Road, and Oakdale Bohemia Road. I would like to, I know it's been a long night, but I'd still like to thank the board for granting the opportunity to have this meeting. We appreciate the fact that they are, that you are making this available to us so that we can move forward with the project. With me, Mr. Lord has identified himself. Pat Lord and Michael Johnson are on the line. They're both from North Point Development. Kevin Pollitt is the architect. He's also available by phone. And Dan Peveraro from the Laurel Group is the engineer, is also part of the project. As you may recall, this matter was originally before you on March 4th, 2020. And when we met at that time, the discussion about this project dealt mainly with three areas of concern: the height of the project, the aesthetics of the project, and the FAR of the project. After revisions and discussions with the planning department, we were able to provide you, happily provide you with the plans that are in front of you tonight that reflect, the revisions reflect improvements that we think will make the project overall more acceptable to this board. The height of the project has been lowered and is now in compliance with the zoning code provisions, so no variance is required with regard to the height. The aesthetics and the elevations that have been provided that Mr. Peveraro will address when he speaks right after me have been improved significantly so that they're more in character with the surrounding residential area. And with regard to the FAR, the overall FAR is the same as what was presented to you the first night. However, with the reduction of the height of the project, we put a greater portion of that FAR below the surface. And while I understand and acknowledge that the zoning code does not make a difference or differentiate between FAR that's above the surface or below the surface, I do think that that change does have a significant impact on how this project is going to be viewed from the outside and how it will not have a detrimental material impact on the surrounding property owners. So not to take up any more of the board's time, I would like if Sean could activate Dan Peveraro's microphone so that he could just take you through the changes. There were some other modifications that were made in order to reduce the impact on the residential community.
Dan's microphone, Dan is not muted, so Dan, if you're ready to speak, the floor is yours. So I don't know if Dan's having audio issues, but on our end, Dan, you are not muted. So if you are able to speak, you are unmuted on your end. The floor is yours.
Yeah, he referenced in the chat that he's having difficulties with his video, but his audio should be good.
Yeah, in both cases, there is no mute icon over his name, so he should be able to speak, but for some reason, we're not hearing him. Let's try this. Dan, try one more time. Dan, we can see you now. Nice tie. Oh.
And we still can't hear you.
Dan, one other thing you could try is if you can access the dial-in number, we can see your number come up and we can quickly unmute you that way.
Dan, try now.
Any luck?
Yes.
Okay. So sorry about that. My apologies. So I will walk you through the plan now. So the changes that we made plan-wise weren't very significant. Not a lot changed, but the changes that we did make, I think, are significant in that they changed a lot of the issues that we spoke about previously. The biggest one is that we went to a basement, which I'm sure Dave spoke about. Unfortunately, I was unable to hear him. But we went over to a basement, which lowered us by an entire floor. So we're only 2 stories high. That basement still applies to FAR and parking. However, where the height is down to 35 feet and 2 stories. Additionally, we moved the drive-in units away from the south part of the property, which abutted the residential, and moved them over towards the north to get them away from the residences. And additionally, we'll be providing a hedgerow and a lot of street trees along that Sunrise Highway frontage to ensure that those doors are adequately screened. And if there are any questions from the board, I know that we submitted a building rendering. I know that we went back and forth with planning significantly to significantly change the architecture of the building, and I think it's much more residential in nature now than it was the first go around. So I don't know if it's possible to bring up that building rendering.
Checking right now to see if we have it. Here, 1 second. There you go. You want to speak about that? Did you have any comments on the rendering? It's up now.
Oh, sorry. So, Sean, I don't know if you have the rendering as opposed to the elevations. I think the rendering gives sort of a better feel for the changes here. We went to a more residential style roof. We changed to brick facade around a lot of the first floor of the building and in architecturally important areas to break it up. The windows, we went back and forth on that to give a more residential feel. All in all, the general gist was to make the building look a lot less industrial than it did the first time, and make it more fit in with the adjacent residential. And a big part of that was also lowering the height.
Sean is looking for that. I'm not sure if we have it here to show it. Is there more to your presentation that you guys want to cover? And if we find it, we'll come back to it.
No, I think if there are any questions from the board, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, if there's nothing further from the applicant, I will go to a report from Ms. Wozniak on this one. No, it's Mr. Colgan on this one. To Mr. Colgan, and we'll come back for any questions. So Mr. Colgan, whenever you're ready to go ahead.
I can hear him.
Give Mr. Colgan 1 second. He's going from the looking for the rendering to get his notes up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was heard at the March 4th, 2020 hearing. The predominant concerns raised at the hearing were the size and height of the building, the garage doors facing the residences to the south, and the architecture and the hours of operation. The applicant has submerged the 3rd floor to give the appearance of a 2-story building. While the FAR remains effectively unchanged, the appearance would be similar to an as-of-right development if the requisite zoning were already in place. The height has also been reduced to 35 feet. Garage doors were relocated to the Sunrise Highway side of the building. This should limit activity closest to the residences to the south. In addition, the hours of operation were limited from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. The architecture was revamped to go from a predominantly industrial modern look to a more transitional look that incorporates a variety of architectural features. Some of these include greater use of residential looking materials such as brick and horizontal siding, additional windows, and a peaked roof. While the building is significantly larger than what is typically seen along Sunrise Highway, code amendments were adopted in the past for the requested zoning district to provide traffic-friendly alternatives for underutilized properties along major thoroughfares. An alternative office use could generate more traffic and potentially have other adverse impacts that proposed use would not generate. The board will have to weigh the impacts of each use. Should the board grant the application, the staff recommends the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Are there questions from the board? Not seeing any questions. Anything further from the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, just one comment. We did not have an objection to the covenants and restrictions that were provided, but for the fact that I believe the original version that was transmitted from Mr. Colgan stated that the hours were between 7 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. And we were asking for 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. if that's possible to be in compliance with our other. Is that? I know Mr. Peveraro had a conversation with Mr. Colgan to that effect. I don't know if I misunderstood.
We're going to check that right now to see what was sent over, but it appears that it's a low key use. I don't think there's an issue, but let me just check with Mr. Colgan 1 second. Mr. Colgan said that the covenants reflect that change, so we should be okay then.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anything further? Any questions? There a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to grant the application based on the CNRs being executed.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the CNRs. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members of the board, thank you. And thank you for continuing to operate during these less than optimal times. Other towns are suspending and canceling meetings, and you guys are still going along. So I really do appreciate it. And thank you to staff.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Very much. Have a good night.
Good night. Item 12, Mr. Taylor, are you back? And Mr. was it Nicolazzi?
They're coming in.
Are you guys able to hear James?
Mr. Nicolazzi, can you say something?
I had him on my phone a minute ago, and he's on. He can see everybody, but it's not coming up. He's telling me. So I don't know if I could put him on speakerphone on my phone. Would that be possible?
I'm going to defer to Alan to see if that would actually work and sound okay.
You could try, and if the audio doesn't work, we have too much feedback, we'll let you know.
For some
But
reason, my audio is not working.
Okay, James, say it again.
For some reason, my audio is not working through the computer. When you guys click on me, it goes blank. I can't hear anybody on my computer.
okay, while this is not ideal, I think the audio quality is clear enough to proceed, but I'll leave it up to the chairman to decide.
Yep. No, we can hear you fine that way. So let's go the route with the speakerphone. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Jim Nicolazzi. I'm with Arch Street Architects. We're here with regards to, actually, we're back here for the second time with regards to the request for two planning board special permits for outdoor overnight parking for the registered vehicles and outside parking for the unattached box trailers with respect to Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68.340-1C and 68.301-8. When we were here previously, we were asked to do some site plan modifications, and we have respectfully done the site plan modifications that you asked for. Specifically, we added curbs around Brightside Avenue and Wilson Boulevard. We added the 4-foot sidewalk around the perimeter of Brightside Avenue and Wilson Boulevard. We also added landscaping along street trees along the Brightside Avenue, and we added landscaping along the facade, the front of the street. We also surrounded the containers, the parking, with landscape upright U's around the existing or the proposed CO2 tank and metal storage container. As per your request then for site plan. That's pretty much it. That's the items that we were able to address. And we have to, also, I'm sorry, the new entry gate was set back from the street, from the original fence, to accompany or to allow for anybody that was to open the gate to pull in and not actually be on Brightside Avenue, but to be on our property. Those were the items that we were asked to address as per the landscape plan and the plans that we submitted to the planning board. We're respectfully requesting a decision.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Ms. Taylor, anything further?
No, I think James covered it.
Okay, then I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak to give us a report.
Thank you. Since the public hearing, the applicant has obtained variances to allow the parking of vehicles less than 50 feet from the street and less than 50 feet from residences. In addition, the applicant has provided additional screening of the vehicles along the southern portion of the parking area. At the public hearing, concerns regarding on-street parking and hours of operation were also brought up. The proposed conditions address those concerns by prohibiting on-street parking for trucks and employees and by prohibiting truck activity between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Based on the proposed conditions requiring attractive landscaping and limiting nighttime truck activity, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Are there any questions from the board? Not seeing any. I'm going to turn anything further from the applicant.
No, that's all.
No, nothing.
Thank you. Mr. Frugieri, is there a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions.
Motion by Mr. Frugieri to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Mr. Mesci, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Musumeci. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Mr. Garbarino looks like is back, so I'm going to go to item 13 on the agenda, S4M LLC, CZ 2018-028, southwest corner of Biltmore Avenue and Idle Hour Boulevard, 96 Biltmore Avenue, Oakdale. Applicant requests a change of zone from residence AA to general service T in order to legalize a non-degree granting school. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application. Mr. Garbarino, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. William Garbarino, 40 Main Street, Sayville, New York. We were in front of the planning board for a public hearing a little over a year ago on this matter. There were some recommendations made for changing of some curb cuts and direction of traffic and parking. So we made those changes. We come in off of Idle Hour Boulevard and go north to get out. It's one way in and one way out. I've worked with Mr. Colgan on covenants and restrictions. We have agreed on them. My client has reviewed them and has signed them. And I've submitted the signed copy to Mr. Colgan and he has them in his possession. This is a property that had been vacant it was part of the Dowling College. It was a pottery school. Before that, it was a synagogue. And this property suits my client's use. It's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, and they have been operating in the community surrounding this property for at least 20 years. So they have a track record. They have a very good school. They've cleaned up the property. And we just want to go ahead and finalize everything and continue. So I respectfully request that you grant the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garbarino. I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was previously heard on December 6th in 2018. Primary concerns at that time were successor uses for the property and the site improvements. The General Service T District precludes many intense uses that a neighbor might typically be concerned about. The proposed covenants and restrictions further prohibit other intense uses such as restaurants and medical offices that are not accessory to a single-family dwelling, otherwise known as a home occupation. In addition, the applicant will be required to increase the buffers on site and add landscaping to incorporate more of a residential feel to the maximum extent practical, given the proposed use and the need for parking. Given the historic uses of the site, the relatively benign nature of the existing use, and the proposed CNRs should effectively prevent adverse uses, the staff does not object to the application and recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Are there any questions from the board? Not seeing any. Anything further from you, Mr. Garbarino?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mr. Brown?
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to close the hearing and grant the application based on the staff report.
Motion by Mr. Brown to close the hearing and grant the application based on the staff report. Mr. Matamore, is that a second?
That's a second.
Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Garbarino.
You too, Mr. Garbarino.
Last item on the agenda, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to close the hearing and adjourn the meeting.
Motion by Mr. Brown to close the hearing and adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
By Mr. Moriarty, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstentions? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Brian,
Yes.
Oh, Alan, you want to turn off the live feed?
I just wanted to
Turn
tell you,
off the
somebody
live feed.
just told me that Jim Brunza, remember